Good afternoon. Welcome to the Durham Planning Commission. The members of the Durham Planning Commission have been appointed by the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners, and you should know that the elected officials will have the final vote on any of the issues that are before us this evening. We are meeting using the Zoom virtual meeting platform, and in that meeting platform, the public participants do not have the ability to talk or be seen on the video by default. And you should also know that to maintain meeting decorum and a discernible record of the meeting, the chat function has been disabled. We will have public hearings on each of the items that are before us this evening. If you've signed up in advance, we have those names. We will call you in the order that you're listed. If you would like to speak, you may press *9 on your phone so you can digitally raise your hand. We will call on you. We will ask that you give us your name, your mailing address, and then you'll have the opportunity to make your remarks on the case that you've signed up or asked to speak on. If you want to call in for tonight's meeting, you can join us by dialing 1-301-715-8592. Finally, all motions are stated in the affirmative, so if a motion fails or ties, the recommendation is not favorable. May we have the roll call, please?
Good evening, Commissioner Busby and everyone else on the call. I will do the roll call now. Commissioner Amendolia?
Here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here.
Chair Busby?
Here.
Commissioner Cameron?
Here.
Commissioner Cutright?
Here.
Commissioner Durkin? I see Commissioner Durkin. I'm going to mark you present. Vice Chair Kenchin?
Here.
Commissioner Lamfrey? Here. Commissioner Lowe?
Here.
Commissioner McIver?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Morgan?
Good evening. Here.
Commissioner Cease?
Here.
And Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any minutes or consistency statements. This is a special meeting, so we don't have any of those before us this evening. Any adjustments to the agenda, Ms. Smith?
No adjustments, Chair Busby, that the staff is aware of. We would like to state for the record that all of the public hearing notices were carried out in accordance with state and local law, and the affidavits for those are on file in the planning department.
Thank you. So we will move to our first case, and this is case A20016, Camden Avenue tier change. And we'll start with the staff report.
Good evening, Chair Busby, Vice Chair Kenchin, and Commissioners. Alexander Cahill here, presenting on Camden Avenue tier change, A2016. We received from Dan Jewell a request to amend the tier boundary for the future land use map. This is located around Camden Avenue and Midland Terrace, and it is in the city jurisdiction. There's about 37.5 acres that are included in this proposal. The current development tier is urban, and the proposed development tier that is being amended is to suburban. The current industrial light zoning is not being proposed to be changed. And the proposal is to amend the future land use map for 11 parcels bounded by Camden Avenue, Midland Terrace, and Highway 85 from the industrial urban tier to the industrial suburban tier. So if we look at the future land use map, we can see that the designation is industrial on the existing future land use map, and the proposed tier change is industrial as well. My slides aren't showing. Awesome. Let me try that again.
Chair Busby and Commissioners, I think staff member has frozen for the moment. Their connection has frozen. We'll get that straight in just a minute, hopefully. Just bear with us.
This is Chris Peterson from the planning department. The computer accidentally restarted, so we might have to just have a 1-minute delay. Thank you for your patience.
I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No problem. We've all been there.
Chris, are the slides progressing now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So we received an application from Dan Jewell of Coulter, Thames and Jewell to change the tier boundary around Camden Avenue Midland Terrace. This is for about 37.5 acres. The current development tier is urban, and the proposal is to change the future land use map to the suburban tier. The existing zoning is industrial light, and no proposed rezoning is included in this application. So you can see on the zoning context map, the area is surrounded by industrial light and industrial zoning. And the future land use map as well calls out industrial land use for the future. The aerial map shows this portion north of the highway interchange. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the development standards that are going to be impacted or could be impacted by this proposed tier boundary change. The project boundary buffers have potential to change from the urban to suburban tier change, as does the parking location. There isn't any change in the MTC buffer and no change in the uses. And then a significant change would be from the tree coverage standpoint. If we move this tier change as approved today from urban to suburban, that would be from a 3% minimum to a 10 to 15% minimum, depending upon the tree preservation or replacement requirement. When we look at tier change requests, we don't get a lot of them, so we want to make sure that we're really spending a little bit of time talking about this. There are UDO requirements for considering the tier change, whether this would be consistent with the goals and objectives of any adopted policies and plans, whether this would be consistent with future land use patterns, whether this would create a substantial adverse impact, whether the subject site is of adequate shape and size to accommodate this proposed change, whether the site is contiguous to the proposed tier change, which it is, and then a couple of other elements, including that this extension does not violate any agreements with neighboring jurisdictions, and it's not in the drainage basin. Staff has reviewed each of these requirements and has found that this proposal is in line with each of these UDO requirements in their intent. So staff has determined that this request would be consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the future land use map and these aforementioned tier change requirements. Staff has determined that this pattern of development is not detrimental to the immediate area and offers flexibility for renovations and improvements to the existing industrial sites. Redevelopment of established industrial sites is favorable when possible because it does prevent the vacation of properties and urban blight, with the same uses being reestablished on greenfield sites further out in the suburban tier as we've seen with other cases. While staff strongly supports urban form development in the urban tier, there may be some cases where the existing tier boundaries were established not considering these scenarios, and we feel this may be one of those cases. The applicant is available as registered to speak tonight and is able to provide a little more information on their intent for requesting this tier boundary change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. We will open the public hearing, and we have only one person who has signed up in advance to speak, and that is Mr. Dan Jewell. So, Mr. Jewell, we will invite you to speak. And then just a reminder, if you are in attendance and you would like to speak on this particular case, you can press *9 on your phone so you can digitally raise your hand. With that said, Mr. Jewell, would welcome your testimony on this item.
Thank you, Chair Busby. Just want to make sure that you can hear me before I ramble on. Thank you. So Chair Busby and fellow commissioners, good evening. Thank you for having this special meeting tonight. I am Dan Jewell, CJT. And thank you, Alexander, for doing a very thorough, succinct presentation. We are requesting this tier change primarily because industrial uses are just not a good fit in the urban tier in our perspective. Over the past several years, our firm has looked at several sites in the urban tier for various manufacturing, assembly, lab, flex type uses for contractors, things of that nature. And in almost all cases, the UDO requirement in the urban tier that buildings be constructed close to the street is not conducive to be able to build these types of facilities. And I've got a few examples I'll show you in a second. And these types of facilities are much needed in Durham because they provide space for jobs, in many cases jobs that do not require a college degree, in some cases not even a high school diploma. And we know that we have folks in this community who need to be employed. And they provide a great tax base. And they don't put a burden on our schools and generally don't generate a lot of traffic. We have a limited amount of industrial zone land in Durham, which is telling in the staff report that they track how many acres we have on every case that has to do with anything with industrial. We have to preserve that. We have to cherish that. We have to take care of it. But we also know that's been dwindling in recent years as more and more of it is under pressure to be zoned residential. I think you've heard several of those cases over the last few years. And as you all know, the residential market is white hot right now. But the interest in light industrial facilities is growing as well. It's important that we maintain the ability to develop these industrial properties, even those that are in the urban tier like this. Alexander, thank you for bringing up. I have a few slides I'd like to share. A couple things I'd like to touch on this evening. One, this first image. You can see that the urban tier was created a little arbitrarily, I will say. I was involved in some of the citizens advisory group steering committees when the flume was created back in the early 2000s. And I can tell you what happened is it was determined what downtown would look like. And then as you can see, the boundary was literally offset. Those red arrows are exactly the same length. So I don't think there was as much thought into putting what was being captured in the urban tier. It just seemed a good idea at the time to have a zone a couple of miles outside from downtown that would be the urban tier. And just for reference, the little tiny red triangle in sort of the upper right quadrant of the urban tier next to the suburban tier is the property that we are talking about. In fact, having been involved in creating the flume, I don't think there was actually a lot of conversation about the impacts on industrial type development, and I don't recall that there were really industrial developers who were at the table at that time. Next slide, please, Alexander. So this slide represents the neighborhood. You can see the area outlined in red is where our proposal is. And this is development in this neighborhood has existed for at least 30 years, even going back as far as 100, where the the city's former incinerator sits, which is now a great facility for Durham solid waste and nice adaptive reuse project. Most of the buildings have been there for a long time. And looking at this, is it apparent to you where the urban tier pattern of development should be and where the suburban tier pattern of development should be? No, it's a cohesive geographic area described by 85, Ellerby Creek, things of that nature. But there is basically a consistent pattern of development out here. And if you look at all of these facilities closely, you'll see that the consistent pattern of development is buildings that are set back from the street, some parking in the front, and generally the entire now area west of Midland Terrace, which is currently in the urban tier. Every one of those buildings is now non-conforming because of that. So if anybody wanted to go expand their building, expand their facility, they would have to bring it into greater conformance by coming out more closely to the street. Next slide, please, Alexander. This slides, I have two slides that show how industrial facilities, these light manufacturing, assembly, flex space are actually built. This is the Expressway Industrial Park down Briggs Avenue, just below Durham Tech. Most of you have probably driven past it. Maybe you've driven in there. And what I'd like to point out, there is a consistent theme in every one of these buildings, one or two of which our firm has done over the years. And that is a rigid separation of truck traffic for loading docks from vehicular traffic. So you can see generally we have parking for cars out closer to the street in front of the building, for customers, employees, folks that are visiting, that sort of thing. But in every case, the truck traffic and moving area is separated from where vehicles will go. And by the way, these buildings are also set back from the street. And this site, these properties are also now in the urban tier, meaning these are also non-conforming as well. But I just show this as an example. And the next slide, Alexander, is a similar one. This is the former IBM industrial park down at Cornwallis and South Alston Avenue, where again, you can see this pattern of development. Every one of these facilities where you have the vehicular parking, car parking up in front of the building closer to the street, and the truck parking totally separated from that, either behind or in the case of that building in the foreground, an actual court in the middle that creates trucks. In fact, the building to the left with the white roof used to be an IBM facility that was strictly storage for them. There were 2 employees. It was just stuff was stored there and trucks would come in day out. When it was sold about 5 years ago and they looked at creating more spaces for other users in there, the first thing they did was they asked us to put a separate car parking lot off the street, off South Alston. If you look just to the left of that building, you will see that new parking lot that we did a few years ago. And finally, you know, not to get repetitive on all this, but the last slide, Alexander, it's not just a safety reason having to do with trucks. It's just good practice. This is Sandy Ridge Elementary School up Old Oxford Road. And we have designed many of the new schools in Durham over the last 25 and 30 years. Notice what you see on this site. Above the school is the bus maneuvering and parking area. Below the school on the Old Oxford side is where the employee parking, visitors parking, and that sort of thing. So even standard school design for many years has realized that you don't want to mix cars with large vehicles like school buses. So Alexander, that was the last slide I wanted to show. So what I'd like to close with is that as Alexander said, the dimensional standards are very similar for the suburban versus the urban tier, but the tree coverage area is much larger. And our buffers are larger as well. I want to say we did have much conversation with staff before we came through with this proposal on whether it was better to do a variance, because I believe there have been maybe half a dozen variances over the last couple years to try and deal with this square peg in a round hole in the urban tier of industrial facilities. versus a tier change. The staff is aware, as Alexander said, of the inherent conflict now between the urban tier and these industrial sites. As he said, the staff is supportive of the idea of the tier change here, but because the planning department is very busy and they're currently in the middle of a new comprehensive plan, they encouraged us to have a privately led initiative to change the tier rather than have the planning department do it, the city do it. So I'll close with that and just hope you will agree that this does seem a better approach so that we can maintain our industrial viability in Durham, that the request is a reasonable one, would not negatively impact the neighbors at all because it is the pattern of development out there and would be beneficial to the economic future of Durham. So thank you for your attention and for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell. I don't see anyone else who has asked to speak on this item. We'll just give it one more moment. Again, you can press *9 on your phone to digitally raise your hand if you'd like to speak on this item. There's no one else, so we will close this public hearing. Commissioners, I'll turn to you, and Commissioner Miller, I see your hand is raised. We will start with you. Any questions or comments on this case?
So I have a couple of questions for Dan.
Sure.
Dan, I agree with almost everything you said, and it alarmed me back in 2005, and I haven't been happy about it since, that using a radius to draw important lines, especially lines, we call this a tier boundary change, and we treat it a lot like a changing of the flum map. But because changing the tier boundary actually changes the regulations that govern use of the land, it's actually a rezoning too. You can call it whatever you want to, but under North Carolina law, when you change the map so that what somebody can do with their land is one thing one day and another thing the next day, that's a rezoning. And that's why we're jumping through these hoops this way. Using radii for land planning, especially when zoning rules follow with it, is a lousy way to do business. And I agree with you. I rode out there, and I'm very familiar with this area of town, and it's very hard to characterize what's out there as urban or to foresee it becoming very urban. So I agree with you on all of those points, and I agree with the staff and the way they analyzed it. But I also know that nobody spends the money to go through this process unless they have a project in mind. What does the owner, what do your clients want to do with this land that being in the urban tier is stopping them from doing?
Yeah, yes, sir. I think to be more exemplary of what they have in mind, and our clients, just to be clear, have a contract to purchase about 3/4 of this property, which has been in the Durham Coca-Cola bottling company land for ownership for years and years. The building that's out there used to be Classic Foods. That was their catering business, but they no longer are in that.
It's still signed that way.
Yes, it's still signed that way. Yes, sir. So they would like to do a series of buildings similar to some of those buildings you saw in the Expressway Industrial Park, buildings that would have a mix of tenants, mix of uses. Those could be lab space, they could be assembly space, light manufacturing, some warehousing, things of that nature. But again, because of the heavy loading dock and truck court areas that are associated with all those buildings. One, we need to separate the car parking from the truck parking, and that needs to be in front of the building. The way the land lays out for the buildings to be parallel to the street is a better way to do it. And just, simply from a design standpoint, I know people that own these industrial buildings, I'm sure are proud of them, but from a design standpoint, they're not exciting. And I, personally think that having them a little farther off the street than the 15 or 20 feet away than the urban tier requires is probably a better appearance for Durham to go out there. But that is their intent, if that explains it.
Well, and it does, and I really appreciate it. I will observe, though, that I have always thought that the city's buildings out, club, and one of those buildings, I don't know if it's still city property, is on Camden Avenue in that kind of brick industrial art deco. I always thought those buildings were kind of charming. But again, I think the point you make is a really good one. And so if I may, Mr. Chairman, my next question is to the staff. So here we are, in 2005, we adopted a tier system, and it's not altogether illogical, but Dan says that at least in this instance, it's a situation where it has caused a lot of grief because it wasn't very thoughtful when we drew this urban-suburban tier boundary. And we didn't, it appears that we didn't think it through. So a lot of people have been seeking adjustments at the Board of Adjustment. And this, I think, is actually a better way to do it. In our new comprehensive plan, the way the staff is talking about it now, will the tier system survive?
Great. Grace, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll be glad to. I don't want to say with 100% certainty, but
I know you can't.
Yeah, I don't know that it will. I know that it, I know it has a lot of, there are a lot of benefits, a lot of pros, a lot of cons. I will just say it's on the table and we're definitely discussing and looking at it. So I can't say, but we're taking all of these cases like this in mind and in consideration. And this has really been a good one for us to, we don't get many tier change requests, as you noted. We don't get many. I think people go the other route to accomplish what they're trying to do and get their end result. So we've taken this case and it was really a good exercise for the staff. And then the questions that you posed were even, made us dig a little deeper and look at the issues at hand with these tier boundaries. So I don't want to say one way or the other where we're going to land, but we're definitely looking at it closely. And it may be that they go away as part of this new comp plan, because it might be we go a whole another direction because we're talking about using place types. So that,
well, and I agree. I do think that it is logical to build in concepts of graduated development intensity around logical centers. And this was certainly one way of doing it, but I think that I hope we'll go to a more nuanced system that is perhaps stronger in policy and softer perhaps in regulation, so that we don't have to jump through a lot of procedures to merely accomplish what's being done here. So I'm going to vote, to my other colleagues on the Planning Commission, I'm going to vote in favor of this, even though it is going to make a jagged line in the tier boundary. If it were possible for Mr. Jewell to apply to make a bigger correction in this area, I would have loved to have looked at that and perhaps voted for that too. But right now we'll just have to be satisfied with the correction here, knowing that it's going to make like I said, a bit of a jag in the boundary.
Thanks, Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I don't like voting for anything that makes something more suburban, more sort of auto-oriented, but I am going to be voting for this one. I think that it's something that we should be supporting and something that I support. I will say that I have seen some good urban types of industrial development and industrial land uses in other places, eco-friendly industrial parks and industrial uses. And so I think it's something that we should explore as part of the comprehensive plan, is how do we build industrial sites in a more eco-friendly way? Because I don't think that this proposal is eco-friendly. And, I also think that that we should be understanding that if that's not the norm, then it's difficult to change the paradigm.
Sounds like you had a second on that, Commissioner Baker. I don't see any other commissioners looking to speak, so.
Sorry, got the dogs out of the way. Just a couple other things. Mr. Jewell showed an image of a school and showed the image of how we kind of build schools, or have been building schools over the past several decades. I think it's something we have to get away from. We have to go back to building schools the way we used to, and bringing them up a little bit closer to the street, making them more walkable and pedestrian friendly. You can still separate the auto traffic with the bus traffic, and having them on these kind of massive sites with one-story schools. And then regarding the tier system, just because that came up, I do see a use for the tier system, but not for like another layer of zoning, kind of like what Tom just talked about. I think that, like the place types that the planning department has been talking about makes sense. And that's really like the future land use is kind of like the what and the how, versus a tier system would make more sense as a where and when, and like when should we develop and at what intensity. And the way that we use it now just kind of confuses things, and as it's been mentioned in this meeting and before this meeting is somewhat arbitrary. So that's all I have. I will be voting for this case.
Thanks, Commissioner Baker. No one else is looking to speak, so this is the appropriate time. I will accept a motion for approval.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may then, in connection with case A20000016, the Camden Avenue tier change, I move we send this forward to the City Council. And Grace, does this also have to go to the Board of Commissioners since it's a tier change?
No, the jurisdiction is within the city.
Okay, that we
Sorry.
send it forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. So moved by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Amendolia, and we'll have the roll call vote.
Okay, Amendolia,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Busby,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Cutright,
Yes.
okay, Durkin,
Yes.
Kinchin,
Yes.
Langfried,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
McIver,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Morgan,
Yes.
Cease,
Yes.
and Williams.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Passes
you.
14-0.
Thank you, Mr. Jewell.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
You too. We're going to move to our next case, and just so everyone knows in advance, this is the case that was on the agenda. There's a continuance request, so we are still going to open the case, open the public hearing, and then but we'll hear from the applicant and hear from staff. But just so no one gets concerned on the front end, this is case Z20000008, the Ellis Road Commercial Area Rezoning 2 case. And why don't we start with staff, and you can just give us a quick update. Then we can open the public hearing, hear from the applicant, and go from there.
Thank you, Chair Busby and Planning Commission members. This is Danny Culture, representing the Planning Department. Yes, this is Z200008, 0008, 4 zeros and an 8, excuse me. Yeah, I know it always gets confusing when you have this 20 in there first. But anyway, it's Ellis Road Commercial 2. When we, I don't have a formal presentation for this, so we'll reserve this for a future date. But when we were putting together the package for the Planning Commission, we recognized some inconsistencies and brought those forward with the applicant. And at that time, the applicant suggested that we postpone or continue the meeting, but we had already actually released the notifications for that. So I will actually turn it over to the applicant to make the formal request for this. If you
Sure.
Well, and Mr. Culture, thank you. I believe we need to actually open the public hearing. We'll hear from the applicant, and then we can vote to continue this.
Understood. Yes.
Great, thank you. So we'll open the public hearing. Mr. Ghosh, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. And this is Neil Ghosh, attorney at the Morningstar Law Group representing the applicant. As Danny indicated, this is a case of a last minute finding of something that we need to take a closer look at, both at the staff level and the applicant level. So for that reason, we are requesting a continuance to the May Planning Commission meeting so that we can analyze that issue further.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. And so just to be clear, you are asking for a I guess it would be a 2-cycle continuance. I know we're meeting twice in April. This is a special meeting, or Ms. Smith, is it just best to have it just be, we are just thinking of having one May meeting?
Right. It's this would be a continuance to your May 11th regular meeting.
Great, thank you.
And we did after this. This is so unusual how this went down. So, or how this played out. So we went ahead and sent letters right after the first letter. We sent a second set of letters and made sure that the people in the notification area knew what was going on. But yes, but May 11th would be your May meeting.
Thank you. Well, with that, we will continue the public hearing, and I think it would make sense for us to have a motion to continue this case until our May 11th meeting. Mr. Commissioner Miller, I see you have a question, and you may be offering to make the motion.
Both, actually, but before I make the motion, I'm concerned whether or not what we're doing eats up our 90 days. So my first question is the application in its current condition one that can be acted on by the decision-making apparatus, or has it got a flaw in it that prevents it from being a ripe application?
That's an excellent question, Commissioner Miller. We did give the applicant options of either to defer it back to staff, and then it would be it would just start over basically and not be within the 90 days. Because if you continue, it's within your 90 days to review. The application is, I would say, 99% fine. This was a very late breaking small discovery, but it needed to be addressed before it came forward. I mean, staff is willing. You could continue it, or you could defer it if the applicant would rather defer it back so that you don't lose that time. But they've requested a continuance, and they believe they can have this addressed and back in front of you on May 11th for your consideration.
Thank you for that answer. And my next question is whether or not we have a fair number of members of the public here, and I was wanting to make sure that I didn't want to vote on moving this case if there were people out there that came here expecting to be heard without making sure that they had at least been invited to say something. And so, but you know, I can't tell when I look it over at the column.
Commissioner Miller, there were two that we know of. I'm not sure about if anyone else has joined late breaking, but at the beginning of the meeting, there were two people registered and on the call that were interested in this case. I don't know, I don't see that they have their hands up, but I think that we should just make it clear if they'd like to speak, they're more than welcome to speak at this time. I do know they're in attendance. I see their names.
Okay, and so
I do believe one of them has their hands up.
Before I turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman, my own preference is to not continue it in a way that burns up 60 of our 90 days. I would rather defer it and then have it come and start fresh at our May meeting. You know, I don't see how there's any difference to the applicant, but it allows us to the leeway that I would like to have when we first hear a case to have the fullest range of decision making that we normally expect to have.
And thank you, Commissioner Miller. And Ms. Smith, I mean, this is an interesting situation because, and a question for you, does this actually, to quote Commissioner Miller, burn up 60 of our days? This is a special meeting, and so it's in the middle of the month, and this is going to then take place at our, essentially, a regularly scheduled meeting. So what does that mean for this case?
Right. If you continue it from this evening to May 11th, you're not actually, I don't think it's quite 60 days, but Mr. Miller has a point. It does subtract those days out of your 90-day. review. It might not be exactly 60 days, but it's definitely a little bit more than a regular one cycle continuance.
Right. Thank you.
Chair-
Which
Chair
I think does
Busby?
mean, Commissioner Miller, your point is valid. If we just then go back to regular meetings, we probably could only have one additional cycle to work with.
Right. And the applicant actually has their hand raised along with another commissioner, and I think one of the callers that's online as well.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go on mute.
We'll start with with Mr. Ghosh as the applicant, and then we will move from there.
Sure, and thank you, Commissioner Miller, for pointing that out. That's not our intent at all, and we'd be happy to have it, whatever the appropriate term is, deferred back to staff rather than continued, so that it does not eat up any of your review time. That's not the intent here at all. The intent here is to address a technical issue that was found too late to after this was scheduled for the hearing. That's all.
Commissioner Miller?
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up that with a question.
You may.
So if the applicant prefers a deferral rather than a continuance, what's the procedure for that, at least as it relates to us? Isn't that a unilateral decision on the part of the applicant?
Right. So you would need to defer it. The one time that this has happened before, it was deferred back to staff, and then we have to re-advertise, so the applicant will have to pay another notice fee. That is the implication for the applicant.
Right, but
it's
do
like
we have
starting
to
from
vote?
scratch. Right.
Do we have to vote?
You do. I think you need to vote to close the public hearing, or at least maybe, and then the action you would be taking is that you're deferring it back to staff.
All right, I appreciate that very much. I just want to know where we stand procedurally as we make our decision going forward. Thank you. Those are all of my remarks and questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Busby.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Durkin, you've been patiently waiting.
I would vote for deferment also. I think it's a little weird that we're having an open public hearing on a matter that we know nothing about, that we don't have a staff report or any materials on. So it's just kind of an odd situation to hear from the public on it when they probably know more about it than we do, and to have nothing to look to at all. So I would definitely be in favor of a deferment and not a continuance. It doesn't seem appropriate.
Thank you. I would agree. Before we do that, I do want to give the opportunity to the one member of the public who has attended the meeting, raised their hand when Commissioner Miller asked if they were interested in speaking. If they are still with us, it is Simon Brostein. And we will unmute you, so you should have the ability to speak in just a moment.
Okay.
Please, you may go ahead. If you can give us your name, your address. Sounds
Okay.
like we're going to vote to defer this, so it will be coming back at a later date, but would welcome any brief remarks.
Thank you. My name is Simon Bronstein. It's 812 Talbot Place, 27703. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, good. So we just recently moved here from Louisville, Kentucky, and it's a big surprise that around 10 miles, it's no place where we can actually go buy grocery, go like buy any other stuff. And you just thinking about useless hotel, motel, it does not matter because it's useless in this place, have motel. It's very important to have something like retail for people. It's around 10,000 people live without any store, without any like marketplace, something like this. And according to the plan, I seen that plan, it should be marketplace. It was no words about motels. So we're just wondering why it's question arised to him. Because all hotels motels stay empty now. Why we need more empty motels? I don't know.
Thank you, Mr.
That's my emotion because I'm legally blind and we don't have car. And I don't know how we will survive in this environment without anything around. When we bought this house, been told that within 6 months, we bought in August. Within 6 months, we will have something to buy, a gas station, like food store, something like this, restaurant, but nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Bronstein, for your comments. And it sounds, just so you know, it sounds like we will at least in a moment, I think, be entertaining a motion to defer this case. And so that will lead to additional opportunities for you. I would encourage you to engage with the applicant and with the staff in the interim as this may move forward.
That's a good idea to postpone this, but always keep in mind that there's live a lot of people, okay, who will use this, will bring money to go to city, to state. So why we will have empty hotels instead of like machine to make some money and give people like much more convenient life.
Well, thank you for your comments. I hope you'll return when this comes back to us for the public hearing. At the moment, we actually have not seen any of the items on this case, so would welcome your additional thoughts when this returns to the Planning Commission. I also do want to recognize our next speaker. There's one other member of the public who has indicated their interest in speaking. It is Kimberly Leathers. Mr. Ghosh, I see you would also like to speak, so I will circle back to you in a moment. But Kimberly Leathers, you're welcome to offer some brief remarks. Again, if you give us your name, your address, and your comments, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, yes, my name is Kimberly Leathers. My address is 1509 Stone Road. I'm also a resident here with Simon in Ellis Crossing subdivision. And part of my question is answered by both you and Ms. Durkin. A lot of residents are concerned of what exactly is happening, and we have been overwhelmingly unsuccessful with getting back any information from the applicant. We're only aware of a proposed, the changes from some of the retail space and apartment units being converted into a possible hotel, but it seems like you all are not aware of anything either. And initially, I just wanted to know, even if it's going to be moved to May, like, is there any way for us to have any idea of these major changes that's being proposed for the community? Because we can't get anywhere with the applicant. And this is an issue amongst hundreds of residents in our community that we're having.
Thank you, Ms. Leathers. I'll say a couple things. Number one, I'll give Mr. Ghosh an opportunity to respond. I would hope in this interim time there would be an opportunity for both of you who have offered comments to interact with Mr. Ghosh and the applicants. But the other thing that will happen is that when this does clear staff review and comes back to us, the case will be posted online, so you'll be able to review that just like we'll be able to review it. And again, we'd welcome your opportunity to return and to offer any additional comments. With that said, Mr. Ghosh, you had your hand raised earlier. If you did want to make any final comments, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you. And I'll just say this. I mean, I don't want to, because we're requesting a deferment, I don't really want to get into the particulars of the case. I recognize that a public hearing is coming. But I did want to address the first speaker, whose last name I didn't catch. I just wanted, this is just a matter of public record. There is a site plan that has been approved for a grocery store on the site adjacent to this. So I don't know that it'll be built within 6 months or whatever, but there is a grocery store that is coming in. And I just wanted him to be aware of that because it sounded like it was something that he was looking forward to when he first moved in. It's happening.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Ms. Smith, I want to recognize you as staff.
Yes, Chair Busby. The staff has the email addresses for both of the callers that have called in this evening, and we are we're chatting behind the scenes. We will proactively reach out to these citizens and share what we have on file now, which is probably going to change slightly before it comes back to you, but we can share what we have now on file, and we're more than happy to answer their questions and try to share whatever information that is they're looking for. So we'll be in touch with them.
Great. Thank you. That's greatly appreciated. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you. I was going to make a motion if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman.
It is.
But before I do, I wanted to thank Mr. Bronstein, and to note that he is just recently come to Durham from Kentucky. Welcome to Durham, and how quickly he has identified one of the issues for the area that we're talking about. So I'm grateful for that, and I'm something I'm sure we'll be exploring when this case comes before us. So with regard to case Z200008, the Ellis Road Commercial Area Rezoning 2, I move that this case be deferred until our regularly scheduled meeting in May, which I believe is the 8th. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Actually, well, if you're wanting to defer it back to staff, you don't need to.
Oh, okay, then that we defer it back to staff and then so that it may be
until further notice.
placed on the calendar at the appropriate time.
Seconded.
Thank you. So the motion is to defer back to staff, moved by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Morgan, and we'll have the roll call vote.
Amendolia,
Yes.
Baker,
Yes.
Busby,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
okay, thank you. Cutright,
Yes.
okay. Durkin,
Yes.
Kinchin,
Yes.
Lanfred,
Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
MacIver,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Morgan,
Yes.
Cease,
Yes.
Williams. Commissioner Williams? Okay. Commissioner Williams may have stepped away, so it's unanimous 13-0 to defer back to staff.
Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing that come back when it is ready. Our next case, this is our final case this evening, is case Z20000014, and it's the Courtyards at Southpoint II case, and we'll start with the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, before we begin, I notice a couple of members of the public have their hands raised. I don't know whether that's just an administrative thing or whether we have business that's left over from this last thing. I want to make sure that the public understands what we've done because it is unusual.
Yes, Mr. Miller, I think some of the folks who spoke earlier their hands are now down. The people whose hands are currently raised, I recognize as looking to speak. They've signed up to speak on the case that we are just opening.
Very good. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
No, that's fine. It's always a good question. You don't have the list. We have a lot of folks signed up to speak on this item. And so we can start with the staff report. And I do believe those three individuals who have their hands raised will be speaking during this public hearing.
Thank you, Danny Coulter, again for the planning department. Let me get this started correctly. There, can everyone see the slide presentation? Available?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Again, Danny Coulter with the planning department. This is a request for zoning map change Z200014 Courtyards at Southpoint II. It has been received from Neil Ghosh of Morningstar Law and Group for 2 parcels of land totaling 42.83 acres and located at 7852 Herndon Road and 1404 Fenwick Parkway. The site is zoned rural residential RR and Falls Jordan Watershed Protection Overlay District B, FJB, and is within the suburban development tier. The applicant proposes to change the zoning designation to Planned Development Residential 1.682 or PDR 1.682 for a maximum of 72 single-family residential dwelling units. The future land use map is designated as very low density at less than 2 dwelling units per acre. No change to the FLUM is being proposed. An associated annexation petition, BDG 200011, has been submitted for approval to bring the site into the city's jurisdiction. This is the aerial map showing the location of the site. It is located adjacent to Fenwick Parkway. Fenwick Parkway dead ends into the site. And also Martree Drive, which is just about under completion from the original Southpoint Courtyards at Southpoint I. It dead ends into that location, into the site as well. And also the site is adjacent to the American Tobacco Trail. It borders the site on the west. These are site photos showing the frontage of the site. It is primarily wooded with a mixture of pine and hardwood vegetation, except for a 128-foot wide Duke Energy power transmission easement, which is located through the eastern portion of the site, traversing north to south. And again, this is from Fenwick Parkway to the east and the site frontage from Martree Drive to the north. And also from the American Tobacco Trail to the west. These are adjacent site photos. The site surrounded by adjacent single-family development to the north and east and vacant forest land to the south and opposite the AT&T Trail to the west. Single-family development in the Courtyards at Southpoint to the north, single-family development as well, and vacant land off of Scott King Road, forested land, and adjacent American Tobacco Trail. And then also vacant forested land opposite the American Tobacco Trail to the west. The zoning context map, as I mentioned, is zone RR, and the applicant is proposing to go to PDR 0.1682. The future land use map, as mentioned, is zoned very low density residential. There would be no change to the future land use map. The development plan, this is turned sideways, but the development plan indicates proposed building and parking envelopes, which are hatched, the required access points through here and here, Fenwick and Martree, all riparian buffers and 100-year floodplain in this area. The tree coverage areas, which are in the asterisk areas, and project boundary buffers that are required for the site. And also the development plan calls out for a maximum of 24% impervious surfaces. There we go. There are several key commitments included. No disturbance shall occur to the site area located between Duke Energy power line easement and the eastern property line, with the exception of requirements to extend Fenwick Parkway. Single-family detached lots are not permitted outside of the development envelope shown on C200. The maximum of 37 units may be received certificate of occupancy prior to the completion of a second point of access to a public street. A new shared use trail connection will be shown on the site plan to connect the internal sidewalk system to the existing American Tobacco Trail constructed by the developer to NCDOT and City of Durham standards, and conveyed to the City of Durham prior to the site plan approval. All lots will be single family detached, including principal and accessory uses. The maximum number of lots within the project will not exceed 72. For community design connectivity, the development shall include a minimum of 2 pocket parks with at least one of the following: 2 benches or a gazebo, and the development shall also include at least 1,200 linear feet of continuous walking trails within the community, and at least 1 pedestrian connection to the American Tobacco Trail. There are some additional traffic commitments. Installation of traffic signal on steel poles and mast arms subject to MUTCD warrants and approval of NCDOT at Fayetteville Road and Massey Chapel Road at the Massey Chapel Church driveway. Installation of a traffic signal on steel poles and mast arms at Fayetteville Road and Massey Chapel Road at the Children's Campus driveway, and revised pavement markings on Fayetteville Road to provide an exclusive southbound left turn lane with adequate storage and appropriate tapers at the realigned Atkins Heights Boulevard side access. These are the comprehensive plan policies that are applicable to this proposed development, and all these policies are being met. Staff analyzed this request and is consistent with all policies and ordinances. And staff is available for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. We got a lot of folks signed up to speak, and so we will open the public hearing. Looks like we have 5 or 6 proponents that are signed up. Most, I think, are with the development team at the moment. It looks like we have about a dozen individuals who have signed up as opponents. So we will start with the proponents and the applicant. Mr. Ghosh, I assume you will speak, but let me read to you who else has signed up. You can let us know who's part of your applicant team, and then we'll see if there's anyone else who's signed up. We also have Joshua Renke, Jason Coffey, Ryan Akers, and Walter Krivasserat.
I cannot speak for Walter with the last name there. Yeah, he's not part of the team.
But everyone else is with you?
Yes.
Great. We'll give 10 minutes to the applicant and proponent team, and each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak as well. But Mr. Ghosh, I'll let you start on behalf of the applicant.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Coulter. Good evening, Chair Busby, Vice Chair Kinson, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Neil Ghosh. I am an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group at 112 West Main Street in Durham. I am representing EPCON, which is the applicant for the proposed rezoning before you tonight. On the line with me is Mr. Jason Coffey, who is with EPCON. Also with us are Ryan Akers, and I believe Laura Holman from McAdams and Joshua Renke from Raymond Kemp. You all may or may not be familiar with EPCON, but they are very active in the Durham housing market, particularly in the age-targeted sector. EPCON is a developer of age-targeted communities, including the Courtyards at Southpoint community just north of this site. In fact, this community is essentially phase 2 of the existing Courtyards community. That community was approved, the one that's being built or is built, that community was approved for 93 homes, and the first house sold there in September of 2019. A year and a half later, that community is almost sold out. So the demand is there, and this proposed community will help fill that demand. And this demand is not just anecdotal. From 2010 to 2020, Durham saw rapid increases in its 55 and older population. Over that time span, in a 5-mile radius from the site, the 55 and older population grew by more than 8,000 people. And that's just in the 5-mile radius from the site. Moreover, this plan is consistent with the recommendations and guidance found in the current comprehensive plan. As a true infill project, this community has been thoughtfully planned out from the density standpoint, building placement, and even the amenities. The building envelope has been set into the site significantly, which places the new homes away from existing homes, including existing homes in phase 1. As phase 2 of the existing Courtyards community, residents here will share the existing amenity center in phase 1, but this community also will provide new amenities which will be shared amongst residents of both phases. Amenities like pocket parks with seating, walking trails, and a committed public trailhead to the American Tobacco Trail. Now, we are not oblivious to neighborhood concerns. In fact, we had a neighborhood meeting, even though one was not required when we filed this case about a year ago. We heard concerns about the connection to Fenwick Parkway, and we explained that the UDO requires that connection. We heard concerns about traffic, and we did a TIA to study those impacts. This project commits to installing 2 traffic signals if NCDOT warrants are met at the intersections of Fayetteville and Morris, Massey Chapel, as Mr. Coulter mentioned earlier. We heard concerns about density, but a density at around 1.7 is in fact considered very low. In all fairness, this is one of the most innocuous residential infill developments one can hope for. The use here is an ideal fit given the surroundings. I know there's a lot of people on the line tonight. We look forward to receiving your feedback and getting a vote from the Planning Commission tonight. Our team is available to answer questions. And if there is any time remaining, I'd like to reserve that time for rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've tracked the time, so you definitely have a few minutes available. So I will you'll have that opportunity. I do want to call Walter Kurivasarat, who has signed up to speak as a proponent, and give him the opportunity to offer his remarks.
Good evening. I made the mistake. I'm more in between both as a proponent and an opponent because I understand change and moving forward. But as that lawyer said before, I do have a lot of concerns of safety and the environment around the area, of adding 72 additional units to the 93 already have. That adds more traffic, adds more pedestrians, adds possibly more crime. A lot more than just the density and other things of concerns. So that's partial. If you want, I can come back to it later and explain more. Or continue.
No, please, you may continue. Congratulations, you jumped to the front of the line because you were listed as a proponent. So we start with proponents and move to opponents. But please, please feel free to share any additional thoughts on the case in front of us.
Okay, we're talking about traffic. Okay, they're putting in 70 additional units plus the 93 that already have that cannot connect to Fenwick. Now you're adding 72 units. Average home has at least 1 to 2 cars. You're looking at an additional 140 cars that have come through a short distance, less than a quarter of a mile of road through a U-shaped development with a lot of kids walking around this area. You're looking at parking. Now, once he said you're going to have a trail that's going to go into the tobacco trail, which is great, instead of walking through the woods and everything, but that's going to bring more people from other developments to park in this area, park towards where that trail is, so it's convenient. Instead of them going down to Scott King Road, which is the park down there, which has parking for people on the trail, they'll use this because it's closer and convenient. And I'm concerned about lighting. We're very limited lighting on our area. Now you're going to add another street or more between the woods and everything with less lighting, which then brings possible crime and people coming around the area. Now everybody lives in the neighborhood of Durham. So you can understand adding additional vehicles, additional pedestrians, and additional people here. That to me is more concerning than following the form of how the consistency of the development is. That to me doesn't, they don't live in this area. We do. I've been here 11 years and I think it's a very nice area, but adding additional traffic, you're looking at making another Sedgwick, which is in Parkwood. They have a speed limit of 25. Ain't nobody stopping for stop signs. There's nobody following that speed limit 25. And then here on Fenwick, in that short little distance, you have a hill that goes straight down. So once they pass that power line and pass that first house that you showed in Fenwick, it's an incline going straight down, which will increase the speed. So it's something that's to be done more of here, of traffic-wise, for people traveling, because you have a lot of young kids in this development. That's pretty much all I have. And I appreciate you allowing me to speak.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your comments. I'm going to read the names of the individuals who signed up, and some of them I don't see in attendance, but I'm still going to read the name, and Chris, I'll read a couple in a row so you can tee folks up. We have Arthur Chambers. I don't see their name. Barbara Taylor, who I know is here. Karen Francola, Peter Gastel. Those are the next names, and I think everyone else is here. Arthur Chambers, I don't think you are with us this evening. So we will move to Barbara Taylor. And again, you'll have 2 minutes. If you can give us your name, your address, share your remarks. When you hit 2 minutes, I'll let you know, and that way you can finish your comments, finish your thought, and we can wrap up from there. So Barbara Taylor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Barbara Taylor. I live at 1302 Martree, and a Durham resident for 27 years. And so I'm in the Courtyards at Southpoint. And first of all, I just want to say how blindsided the residents of the current Courtyards at Southpoint are. If you look at the current website, it states that it's a community of 93 homes with leisure paths connecting to the American Tobacco Trail. Had one resident not received a letter about this meeting, we wouldn't even know about it for tonight. But someone whose lot happens to be close enough to this, what they're calling phase 2, received something and shared it with us online, and that's how the residents became aware of it. There has been zero communication from EPCON about this formally. Now, informally, there have been talks with the sales office at Epcon that they were considering purchasing property adjacent to the current courtyards at Southpoint. We were told if that were to happen, it would have a different name. I'd even heard it called the Courtyards at Herndon, that it would be a separate homeowners association. They would not have access to our facilities at all. And most important, they would have that separate entrance. And now we're hearing that that's just the opposite. The biggest concern is the part that says for the construction that 37 houses could complete certificate of occupancy before they'd even have to put in that second entrance. If you were to look at the plat of the current courtyards at Southpoint, you would see that out of the 93 lots, if construction traffic were to come in to go to that back phase, if that was the only access point, 64 lots, or 64 of the 93, or 69% of the homes would have this large scale truck traffic coming through daily until those 37 homes are completed. Now, currently we have a lot of homes. Our houses shake. We're on small lots. We're near the up to the sidewalk, but we're tolerant of it because we knew we're getting close to finishing out the neighborhood, which has been pretty exciting. The current builders have been doing a great job in rushing to get everyone in. And now thinking that for at least another 2 years, we will have large scale construction up and down our street is just appalling. And especially that this was not, it was never even presented to the current residents. The second point, I'll be quick on this, and I spoke to Danny Coltro about this, is the Epcon representative just stated that they were going to have an access point to the tobacco trail. We were told that promised that would be put in our phase at the end of the cul-de-sac. It's already on the plan. We were told it was being delayed by the city. So I actually went online. It's case D1900304. And I brought it up with Danny Coltro. And if he could mention it now, he said Epcon still has to put that entrance in our phase. So, and those are my concerns, are that we have our walkthrough, which is one of the selling points was supposed to. Right now, the nearest access point is a little over a mile behind the church. For people in the current residence to get to the tobacco trail, have to walk a little over a mile. So we're looking to see that construction doesn't come through, and also that we get our access point in our part. And I don't know whether you have input or not on whether it can be incorporated into our phase or be a separate neighborhood. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Coltra, before we move to the next individual, I'm just going to ask you now, just if you can offer any feedback on the point that was raised, just so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle.
I can. When Ms. Taylor called me and mentioned that, I did, while I had her on the phone, look up any approvals for the courtyards at Southpoint Phase 1 or courtyards at Southpoint original one. And I did notice that there has been a site plan amendment approved that changes the alignment of the American Tobacco Trail connection, which actually is still on their property, but it realigns it so that the other Southpoint Trail or the other subdivision would actually pick up the remainder of that. So the connection point to the American Tobacco Trail would be made through the other subdivision. The finished part of the connection would be made through the other subdivision.
Thanks for the update and the clarification. We will continue with the public hearing. Next, we had Karen Francola.
My apologies, I couldn't find her. She
Hi.
should be.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hi, Karen Francola, 1218 Martree Road. I've been living in the courtyard since December. I agree with everything that Barbara has said. And my question for Mr. Ghosh, you're promising us amenities, from this second division that are on the website now. And why has Epcon not communicated to us about this?
And if you can continue your comments in a public
Okay,
hearing.
I'll continue my comments. Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm a accredited corporate communications and change management consultant for large global organizations. And I've been pressing Tom Sawicki, he's the regional president, why don't you tell us anything? They have not, as Barbara said, not issued any communication. So I feel they've been very misleading. And then the other thing that happens is because of the second development, we're not going to get our HOA transferred to us for years. And EPCON basically does not really believe in representation and doesn't believe in communication. And it seems if there is not a legal responsibility, there should be a moral and ethical responsibility to be transparent with homeowners who, the number one reason I bought this lot, which by the way, these houses are double the median price of Durham, was access to the tobacco trail. And no one as EPCON has sent one formal email, Zoom call, letter explaining, why the delay, why they continue to this day marketing it on their website, as though, you come in here and you're going to have this access. And nature paths. We were promised access and nature paths. So it's just very disturbing that we have not been told anything. And just my one last comment, I hope when Mr. Ghosh answers my question, he can also promise publicly that none of us who are testifying today will be retaliated against, because that is a strong fear. I have been threatened in retaliation in the past by senior EPCON people simply for talking to my neighbors and discussing writing a group letter to higher ups about complaints that we had. So it takes a lot of courage for us to come here publicly and discuss EPCON because they hold all the cards.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your comments. I have reserved additional time that Mr. Ghosh and his team did not use, and so he will have the opportunity to speak. I'm sure he will be able to address many of the questions that are being asked during the public hearing. Next is Peter Gestel.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the chance to address the Planning Commission considering the change for the planned development. It's a planned development residential from rural residential for Southpoint II. I live at 210 South Bend Drive, Durham, North Carolina. I've lived here for 6 years. I'd ask you to consider rejecting the rezoning request for the following reasons. The existing development of Courtyards at Southpoint was supposed to preserve 50% or more of the land as woodland or open space. That must be a work in progress because they clear cut everything and didn't leave a tree standing in the area where the development is. Secondly, current rain and stormwater abatement in that development is only partly working. Crooked Creek was fouled continuously during the site prep. Creeks of muddy water form after every rainfall and drain into Crooked Creek, which in turn flows into Jordan Lake. Standing ponds in the woods downhill from the development have to be putting strain on the trees that are there. The triangle's getting torrential rains due to climate change, so that ponding is likely to increase. There are 2 creeks that feed into Jordan Lake in the proposed development, and Jordan Lake's already under pressure from algae blooms and silt. How another development improves that is beyond me. I pull multiple bags of litter from Crooked Creek behind my home every few weeks, and there's been a marked increase in the trash since the development of the Courtyards. I expect that to worsen with yet another development. I can't prove the development's solely responsible, but I doubt it's coincidence. The initial development created an exodus of wildlife. While I understand that happens with any development and the owners had the right to sell and seek development, I can't believe that another development creating further reduction in local open space for wildlife in exchange for more tract housing improves the quality of life locally. More development means more houses to stare at rather than woodland. So my objections, to recap, is I think there'll be more runoff into the local creeks, more standing water in the forest buffers, further reduction in the quality of the natural environment next to the trail and its shrinking buffers. This does nothing to address affordable housing, The developer apparently is not contributing to the Affordable Housing Fund in Durham, and yet this is more suburban sprawl. Lastly, there's no continuous sidewalks or bike lanes from these developments to the Southpoint shopping centers, which means most resident outings will be by car. I'm unaware of any plans for mass transit to these developments, and the idea that the tobacco trail will be used for shopping will be minimal since it's at least a 3-mile walk one way. So I asked the commission to reject granting the zoning change. I'm not optimistic based on the current stormwater abatements and development that's there, that this second development would improve any of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Andrea Hearn.
Yeah, hello, this is Andrea Hearn, and I have to agree with everything that my neighbors already reported. One of the topics that I want to add to this is that we were not told, I don't know, I've heard the lawyer talk about that there was a meeting about a year ago or something like that, but I don't know how many people were actually present at this meeting. But anybody following that was not told about the second phase. So for us living on Martree Road, this is going to be a major throughway. We are in our 60s. Most of the neighbors here are elderly, right? We don't need all that traffic coming through. We actually bought this house because we were looking to be taken care of as an elderly citizen in this community. So for us, it was a surprise. We were also hoping for a connection to the tobacco trail, which then was kind of like told to us that it's not going to happen. The other thing is the outdoor pool. The outdoor pool is very small. Sharing that with the second development is really like a footbath. Okay, it's a very, very small pool. So, and the other thing is the impact on the environment. We see it all the time. And then Cherub Lane, which goes through that wooded area. Cherub Lane is the connection from Fayetteville to our site, is about 1 mile long, and it's already a racetrack. Okay, anybody else connecting through our neighborhood, and that's going to happen, is going to just race through that to that 1 mile stretch. And that's going to be endangering every elderly citizen that is living in that area, or any other grandchildren that are coming to visit us. And that's all that I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you don't mind, if you could give us your address as well.
Yes, it's 1402 Martree Road.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ginny von Wagner. And Chris, thanks as always for your help on the tech side, getting each person lined up. Following Ms. von Wagner is John Abram and then Liz Godkin. Ginny von Wagner, you should be able to be unmuted here in just a moment.
A request to unmute has been sent, and I don't see John Abram or Liz Godwin. So we will, if you obey, Chair, I recommend we move to Marie Bradford next.
Yes, Marie Bradford, thank you.
Hi, yes, this is Marie Bradford. Actually, I'm listening in. My husband and I, we live at 201 Rocky Walk Court. And our interest for this is really from the standpoint of the access to the tobacco trail. When we moved out here almost 14 years ago, the advertisements were such that we would have access to the tobacco trail. However, that's not the case. You could cut through the woods, as Walter has stated earlier, but it's not an easy or safe or comfortable or quote-unquote legal access to the trail, and that's really what we're looking for. So we thought that the access to the community, would be beneficial. However, the others on the call do raise some concerns. As Walter has stated, from the standpoint of our subdivision, we do have a lot of young children here in this area, and living in like a court environment, it's safe for them, but when you open up, if you open up Fenwick, speed could definitely be a concern. And with the additional traffic and access over there, as Walter stated, that could be a concern as well. But also from the standpoint of the construction. When we met a year ago with the teams and everything, a question was asked about the construction, and it was kind of like explained that the construction would be through the EPCON side and not through the Southampton side. But now we're hearing that the EPCON people also have concerns about the construction. So kind of like my husband and I, we are mixed, where it's like I said, we will look forward to the access to the trail, but we also acknowledge the other concerns by the others on the line.
Thank you. Next is Mike Jobsis.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, and I apologize for probably mispronouncing your name.
You did, but it actually gets mispronounced a lot. It's Mika Yipsis. I am going to be moving into the neighborhood at the end of May. I currently live on Hampstead Court in Durham. My new address will be 1520 Cherub Lane. And I've been a resident of Durham since the early 60s. So I've seen a lot of change. I concur with what my neighbors have said around the things that we've been told that are not coming to fruition, especially in the timeline in which we wish them to happen. For instance, I have a pond in the back. My view is a pond, and I was told as soon as we finish construction within 1 year, we will clean up that pond. Well, now we're having construction of 72 new homes. Does that mean I have to wait another year after that, all those homes are constructed, for me to have the pond view that I paid for to actually look nice? The other thing about the HOA I think is really ridiculous, in that if they are saying that are relatively separate neighborhoods, be separated by this big divide of the wetlands, then why are our HOAs together and we have different concerns? And thirdly, the point around the amenities with the pool and the clubhouse, it's, as someone's already said, it's too small for the number of people they're saying. And we were never told that that was going to be something that we had to share. I don't want to reiterate everything that other people have said, but I am very disappointed in the lack of communication. And granted, I don't live there yet. I've received nothing about any of these changes. And when I bought the property back in October, I was not told about these things. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next is Thomas Worsham.
Yes, I'm here, but I'm just observing. I really have no comments.
Okay, thank you. Trisha Smar.
Good evening. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yes, I am a resident of Southampton neighborhood at 513 Valley Mead Drive, which is the community immediately adjacent to the property to the east. And as a community member and an expectant parent, I wanted to voice a couple of concerns. Currently, as several folks have mentioned, Southampton is a small, quiet family community. So small, in fact, that the city of Durham did not deem the amount of neighborhood traffic substantial enough to actually include it in the traffic impact analysis that's included in this report as attachment 10. However, the addition of this extension onto Fenwick Parkway will connect Herndon and Fayetteville roads, which has the potential to draw a great deal more cut-through traffic into our neighborhood. Additionally, no one has mentioned the upcoming Lions Farm Elementary School on Scott King. It's also not been mentioned by the applicant at all in the 68-page zoning report. And the city did not even reference it as a concern in the transportation and school impacts in attachment 7. While not part of the courtyards at Southpoint II, the Lions Farm Elementary opening will have a tremendous impact on foot and vehicle traffic in this area. How the developers choose to design this road would impact whether drivers consider it a viable cut through to bypass traffic that will inevitably back up on Scott King. And if the developers are conscious about designing the AT&T connection for the entire South Durham community and not just their residents, that could encourage more families to commute to school by bike or foot, thus reducing vehicle traffic and congestion. The applicant references in attachment 5 that they will follow NCDOT and City of Durham standards and policies when developing both the roadway and the AT&T path. However, nowhere does it mention whether it will prioritize vulnerable roadway users like pedestrians and cyclists, which is part of NCDOT's Complete Streets policies, and the City of Durham's Vision Zero initiative? How will Courtyards incorporate engineering design elements that are proven to reduce vehicle speeds and keep pedestrians and cyclists safer? It is incumbent upon Courtyards at Southpoint to build a roadway that deters vehicles from driving at unsafe speeds, while also prioritizing the safety of pedestrians and cyclists that will be traversing that route and the new AT&T path. I advocate that this rezoning plan only be approved with commitment from Courtyards to prioritize pedestrian safety and from the city to do further analysis on the true impact of foot, bicycle, and vehicle traffic once Fenwick is expanded and Lions Farm Elementary opens. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to circle back to Jenny Von Wagner, we weren't able to unmute her before, just to see if we're able to give her the opportunity to speak. And then I see that Arthur Chambers joined us as well, who we called on earlier but wasn't with us. So why don't we start with Jenny Von Wagner? Chris, any luck unmuting her?
I submitted a request, Chair, and I am unsuccessful.
Okay. Jenny Von Wagner, you may want to hang up and call back in, and we'll see if we can get you on a better connection.
The microphone just got muted.
Oh, great. Congratulations. Hopefully that was the hardest part. The floor is yours. Ms. Von Wagner, are you with us?
They may be having technical difficulties, Chair. Maybe we proceed to Arthur Chambers.
Yeah, we'll circle back one more time if we're able to do that. And Arthur Chambers, if you can give us your name and address, and then you can share your comments.
I'm unable to reach Arthur Chambers as well, Chair Busby.
Okay. For both Jenny Von Wagner and Arthur Chambers, you may need to hang up and call back in, and we can see if we're able to give you the opportunity to speak. We would certainly like to hear from you on this item. While we wait to see if we can work out those issues, if there is anyone else who would like to speak on this case who has not yet spoken, you can press *9 to digitally raise your hand, and we'll give you the opportunity to speak. So I don't see anyone else who's raised their hand. So Jenny Von Wagner and Arthur Chambers aren't able to speak at the moment. Mr. Ghosh, I think we've heard a lot of the comments. There's no one else who is asking to speak. And so you had about 6 minutes of time, and you are welcome to use that. I certainly hope you can address some of the issues that were raised that you're able to address during that time.
Sure, and thank you. So we did hear a lot, and I'm going to address some of the comments we heard. We've got other members of the team that are going to address some of the comments we heard as well. The first thing I want to start with, there was one speaker who suggested that new Durham residents or new folks moving to Durham or new development somehow would encourage more crime in Durham. And I just have to say, and I think some of you were on the Planning Commission with me when I was on the Planning Commission, this is not a line of reasoning that I feel I can tolerate. I just don't think that people who move to Durham are criminals, and I do not think that that is really a valid statement. I, in fact, think that there are a lot of really nice people who move to Durham. Anyway, there was a lot of talk about the connection to the AT&T. And the original Courtyards at Southpoint plan was a 93 unit conservation subdivision. And at the time, the site plan that was submitted did incorporate a intended connection to the AT&T. Unfortunately, EPCON was not able to obtain an easement from one of the property owners to complete that connection. And as Mr. Coulter mentioned, the site plan was amended to remove that specific connection and redesign it in a way that it could be incorporated as part of this project. This project, as you all know, requires a rezoning, And this project, as part of its commitment, includes a commitment to make a public connection to the AT&T. This is not something that could be changed on site plan later. If that commitment is, if this rezoning is approved, that commitment would stand. The only way to avoid that would be to rezone the property again. This connection to the AT&T is something that EPCON is genuinely interested in providing for its residents, was not able to on the first phase, and is continuing its commitment on the second phase to make that connection happen. I did want to allow Ryan Akers on our team to speak a little bit more to the Greenway.
Hey, Neil, this is Jason Coffey. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
I'd rather spend a little bit of time and you tell me, but obviously there's a lot of issues directed at EPCON.
Sure, yeah.
I think there's some, I want to make sure that at least get some time before we get into some of the details there.
Sure.
I guess a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to start off by saying there is no retaliation. That is not what we're going to do. So I want to make sure you feel comfortable in addressing any issues either in a public forum or in a personal one-on-one private time with anybody representing EPCON. So I want to make sure and get that out. I do apologize for communication component. I think some of this is a timing issue. As you know, we started this rezoning over a year ago. Obviously, COVID hit. So we've all been trying to figure out how to work through and navigate this new world. We don't own this property. We're in contract to own it, but right now we're really talking about a land use and a rezoning for the land use, which we think is appropriate for this location. It's going to, again, be an extension of our first phase of what we've already built. Some of these details we're talking about, whether it be connection to the tobacco trail, pocket park, some of the amenities we are going to present in phase 2, those will all come to fruition as a part of the site plan and the site plan approval. So those details, we have those. Right now, we're still trying to understand the land use component of this. And if we get approval of that, we'll get into the details of those other connections and how this works together. Nil did touch base on the tobacco trail connection, and he is correct. We had started down a path of trying to add that to section 1, but we're unable to get the easement, and which actually led us to get in contract with the Herndon family to potentially purchase this property and develop this with an additional EPCON community here. I think that the communication component is, again, something that we need to work on. But again, I think it was because it started a while back. We had their neighborhood meeting a year ago. And every day, as you can see activity out there, we have new residents, which we need to be more mindful of to make sure that they understand what this is, where we're going with this. The fact that it wasn't in some of those communications is we don't have approval yet. We don't have approval for the project. We don't, so therefore, approval for amenities or anything like that is premature at this point, but we will continue to work with staff, our neighbors, et cetera, as we get the land use component of this hopefully approved. Then we'll go into the detail component next of getting into some of the site development, site amenities, et cetera, that we would expect to see as a part of Southpoint II. So I did want to say that real quickly. Neil, I hope I left you some time. I'm here to answer questions as well.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think Joshua Rank, if you're on, if you could speak a little bit to some of the traffic concerns we heard.
Sure. Josh Ranke here, registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina with Ramey Kemp and Associates. I did perform the traffic study. I'll keep it real brief as I know we don't have much time, and kind of hit on some of the highlights that it sounded like there were some concerns. The traffic study was done to kind of include both phase 1 and phase 2. So even though phase 1 was already moving forward, we looked at 165 total single family units. And one of the keys there is we were barely triggering a TIA for the requirement for a traffic impact analysis for the city with that number of units and trips expected, but we did perform the TIA and gave a complimentary courtesy copy to the NCDOT for review also, included them in all the scoping. We did look at 6 study areas along Herndon Road and Fayetteville Road, which is a fairly extensive study area for a development that's barely triggering a TIA in terms of trip generation. One of the things that I wanted to point out is we did not only consider the growth rate for growing it up to the build out year of the site, but also considered adjacent developments such as the elementary school that was referenced down off of Scott King, the Southpoint Mall redevelopment, and just like I said, the typical growth rate that the area has been growing at, and then add our traffic into the analysis. We did have improvements at a total of 3 intersections, including the Massey Chapel ones that were discussed, and at the realignment. The realignment also, that does provide better spacing of some of the driveways along Fayetteville. So just kind of wanted to touch on some of the highlights. Also wanted to point out that the 2 signals that were discussed, I know we were on the hook for looking at a signal warrant analysis. It does appear those are moving forward as part of another development, the 751. I coordinated with DOT and they said that's also tied to that development. So it is guaranteed those are going in, as now there are multiple developments that are sort of responsible for the signalization there. So I just wanted to touch on some of those highlights and kind of make sure everybody did understand that we did consider this. We considered the the first phase as well, and did have sort of an extensive study area. It has been reviewed, and comments were issued by the city with some coordination with DOT throughout. And happy to answer any questions, but don't want to take up any more time. So
thanks. And I guess I'll see if Brian Akers, if we've got some time left, Brian Akers, if there was anything you wanted to add about the Greenway.
Sure, I'm on. Thank you. This is Ryan Akers, McAdams, 2905 Meridian Parkway, Durham, professional engineer with the state of North Carolina. I am the civil engineer of record for the project of both this and the courtyards at Southpoint north of here. We did, in fact, have a greenway connection to the American Tobacco Trail that was proposed due to environmental concerns, that being in a floodplain, and due to this trail having to meet ADA criteria for being a public connection to the American Tobacco Trail. The connection needs to be south of here on the Herndon property. So as Mr. Coffey alluded before, we had to make a pivotal move to acquire easements on the south side, which is why we did not make it with the project north of here. But that is the intent. It is a requirement of our site plan to the north. It is going to be made. So a lot of the conversation and concerns that were made and cited by many of the folks in the courtyards at Southpoint to the north, it is well founded, but it is going to be a connection. It is part of this development, and we will make it. It just needs to adhere to some other engineering constraints, which we're working through. So I just want to make that clear.
Thank you. And Chair Busby, I think that concludes our comments for now. I know there were a couple neighbors that were having some connection issues, and hopefully they've been able to join us at this point.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we will circle back. There were 2 individuals who have not yet spoken who were trying to speak, so want to give them that opportunity one final time. We have, sorry, I lost my, Arthur Chambers, are you still with us?
I am with you if you can hear me.
We can. Please go ahead and give us your name, address, and your 2-minute remarks, please.
Great. I apologize for the difficulties. My name is Arthur Chambers. My address is 1011 Charismatic Drive in Durham, 27713. I've listened to a number of the comments that have been made, some of which I think I would like to endorse and second. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I understand this is a called meeting, so I'll try to keep my comments short. Courtyards at Southgate 1 is developing into a really wonderful community. So far, it seems as though a number of the neighbors have gotten to know each other. We're certainly enjoying what we see, and we don't want that to change remarkably, and that's what we fear. This originally, at least Southgate 1, was planned as a 50% of the community to remain undisturbed as a conservation site with scenic views, including ample woods and green spaces. And that's a quote from the brochure. With this in mind, I have some very significant concerns about essentially what might be considered drainage and flooding issues on the south end of Southgate 1 and at the north end of the new project that's being proposed, Southgate 2. If you stand in my backyard, there's a very substantial steep drop that with rain and with drainage would make any kind of development at the very end of what is proposed as the northern border of this new development to be basically a swamp. I can see potentially extremely unsafe conditions, not just for the current homeowners in Southgate 1, but for the people who may be wishing to build homes. And very frankly, I think that Southgate 2 will become the floodplain for Southgate 1. Once you've denuded the grass and the trees, if you will, from the sites that are proposed, unless you have a significant buffer of both trees and undergrowth between the two projects, you're never going to have an issue where you don't have to worry about a combination of cars getting stuck or mud, essentially, not to mention the fact that large construction vehicles used to make the new project in Southgate 2, if they don't have any other access except through Southgate 1, it's going to be a nightmare. If there's an approval for this particular project, you're going to have a secondary road, not secondarily built, but primarily built to endorse the opportunity for these people to be able to build their property without flooding essentially the perimeter of the two sites as they abut against each other. I'm very concerned about that primarily. I don't know whether there's a proposal, and I know the civil engineer was available at least at one point, and I know that there's a floodplain plan at least, but I'm very concerned that if this isn't upped as a point of interest, that there's going to be more than just a little bit of discontent with the connection between the two sites. So it's a combination of danger, a combination of safety, a combination of flooding. I'm not a civil engineer, but I can tell you that the backdrop from my backyard on Charismatic Drive that goes down to maybe less than 100 feet from the perimeter of the new proposed project is very steep. And if you don't leave a significant buffer, there's going to be a large problem.
Thank you for your comments. You did cut out a couple times, but I think we caught most of what you were sharing with us, and appreciate those comments. I do once again want to give Ginny Van Wagner the opportunity to speak. Hopefully we have figured out those tech issues. Ms. Van Wagner, are you available to speak? Chris, how's it looking?
Her microphone on our end, it looks like it's turned on, but it may be a technical difficulty with actual her equipment.
Okay. Ms. Van Wagner, we are going to move on. If you are able to join us, and we will attempt to give you the opportunity to speak at some point during this hearing. One final call, if you have not yet spoken during this public hearing and you would like to speak, again, you can press *9 on your phone. I will note, I do see two members of the public who have already spoken, who have their hands raised again. I commit that I will get to you. We're going to close the public hearing, but the commissioners will have the opportunity to make comments and ask questions, and I will commit to recognize both of you during my time to give you an opportunity to speak. I don't see anyone else raising their hands. We are going to close the public hearing, and we are going to move to Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Miller, when you are done with your questions and your comments, I'm going to ask the two individuals who spoke as well to offer their comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we are able to make a connection with them, I would rather hear them before I speak. So it's whatever you want to do.
Okay. Why don't we do that?
I have a number of questions. I went out and visited this property. It's an interesting situation. I think the first point that we need to not lose is it's very low density. We're talking about 1.7 units an acre. We don't see that very often. It's a very low density project, but it's an interesting piece of property. A great big hunk of it is taken up with a pretty impressive overhead power transmission easement. It's two sets of towers running side by side along the highest point, especially up there where it connects with the neighborhood next door with Fenwick Parkway, which is a misnomer. It's anything but a parkway. It's just a residential street. And then when you drive around, I first tried to drive back out onto Herndon and then back in on Martree. And I drove down through the neighborhood into Martree and then came up on a barrier where the older neighborhood was joining the neighborhood under construction, and you can't get through. And I'm assuming that, I have no idea why that is, but I'm assuming it had something to do with the fact that the roads in the newer section of the subdivision where construction is going on, those roads haven't gotten their final surfacing, and it may be just to kind of keep the overall traffic on those down, at least on a temporary basis. But if there's another explanation, I'd like to know it, which then caused me to have to get out and drive all the way around onto Fayetteville and come back in from that side to achieve Martree and drive down to that connection. And I have to say I was surprised, and it raised a lot of questions. And the first question is when we approve development plans, I think we need to be really thoughtful about where the connections go, because here is a connection that drives right into a very low area with a what looks to be a perennial stream at the bottom. And it's not just a stream in an easily crossed ditch. The area is very low, and I can imagine it does not take any rainfall at all for that to be a fairly muddy mess. And so my first question for the developers is, you're only building, you're building fewer than 90 units. You only have to have one actual access for under the 90 unit rule. You are required to stub out and reach the existing stubs, but there's an environmental exception that can be obtained at site plan. If this new small subdivision is approved, what will be your actual connections? How will the people live in it? Where will they drive? Will they drive on Fenwick? Will they connect to Martree and then have their choice of going out towards Herndon or out towards Fayetteville? What will the connections be? And I believe we have a traffic engineer with us. Where will these drivers be going? Which of those two connections will they use in your estimation to get where they're going?
Sure, and thank you for the question, Commissioner Miller. I think first, Ryan Akers might be the appropriate person to answer about where these connections are, where we expect them to be with the site plan. You mentioned the environmental exception that can be sought at site plan. Ryan, I want to check with you. Did you have any thoughts on that, or did you answer that question? Yeah.
Sure. Again, Ryan Akers, McAdams. When we designed Courtyards of Southpoint, the substreet of Martree was required by code to this property. And so by code, we're required to make that continuation and stub to it to the north. That's obviously the most convenient connection to go through the Courtyards at Southpoint to access Atkins Height realignment that goes out to Fayetteville Road. The ancillary connection obviously would be Fenwick Parkway, which would be to the south. I would say that would be the ancillary connection.
And when you say ancillary, help me understand what that means.
Well, again, we do have Joshua with Ramey Kemp. They can speak to the traffic. When you look at the larger projection of the way the traffic moves, I mean, most people are trying to get out to Fayetteville, which is an arterial that leads to 40 and to 751. Most people, I do not believe, would want to go to Herndon and then to Scott King. It's for an environment, or I'm sorry, EMS movement. It's great to have that interconnectivity, but I do not believe and do not perceive that to be the primary movement. I do believe it would be through the earlier phase of the Courtyards project and out through Atkins Height.
So the answer to the first part of my question is you do anticipate building the connection down at the bottom of Martree, where it essentially slips off the end of the southern end of the phase that's under construction and right into the creek.
I do actually, yeah. That creek is as defined by our jurisdictional determination by the Corps of Engineers, I believe, is an intermittent stream feature. And so it isn't a perennial, and as such doesn't impose the higher thresholds that the mainstream feature that carries the sewer feature along the first phase of this project. So yeah, we do need to make that connection. And it would be the primary movement. Yes. Yep.
But so right now, unless something dramatic changes, you do anticipate making both of the connections that you have. I don't see a way out of the Fenwick one, but I think that if you wanted to, I think you might have a case to get out of the Martree one on environmental reasons. But it sounds like you don't plan to ask for that.
As a professional engineer, honestly, I wouldn't ever believe that Fenwick would be adequate on its own based on this site. I think we need both, to be honest with you, just based on the traffic. And I'll let Joshua chime in on that on his merit as a traffic.
And this is Jason Coffey again with EPCON. I'll just chime in again. We see this as a continuation of our Southpoint North community. So we think that connection for both of our communities is very important from not only a vehicular standpoint, but also a pedestrian standpoint as well.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Josh Rankin, did you want me to tag in and talk traffic just for a moment to kind of follow up on Ryan Akers, or did you have a follow-up for them first?
Well, no. So I was there and I was trying to imagine living in the subdivision that you're asking for approval for, and where I would want to go if I was going to come out of it. Would I go Fenwick, or would I go onto Martree and then whip back around the way I got in there, which was via the southern end of Fayetteville? And I guess the answer is I would probably try to go to Fayetteville if I was trying to reach the shopping center or any of the other places I would want to go as just to get out of where I lived and get up to whatever else is happening in Durham. But it's not impossible that I might go the other direction too. It depends, a little bit about where I'm going. So I was wondering, based upon what you're the traffic engineer, and I know part of doing these plans is trying to anticipate where the people will probably want to go based upon the way the land lies at the time of your study. What do you think people are going to do? What they're going to ride on Martree, or are they going to take Fenwick?
So I think if you're saying between the two of those, and once again, the key I think is most will want to get to Fayetteville. So when the Atkins Heights Boulevard realignment, that's where we'd anticipate most of the traffic coming out. I think of the two, if you're saying they're going to go to Herndon, Martree might be the more common there, but like I said, ultimately, I think it's Atkins Heights to Fayetteville is going to, convey most of the traffic. And that's what in the city staff's review and the NCDOT, they agreed that that's likely the primary destination. You might have some that go to Herndon, but you might have some traffic that now kind of cuts through and use Atkins Heights to get to Fayetteville. So of the two, if you're saying Martree or Fenwick, I think Martree is the more likely to get to Herndon if you're heading north. There might be some that when the school does open up might use Herndon to head south that way. But ultimately, I think the main one is the Atkins Heights Boulevard realignment with Fayetteville is the primary.
All right, very good. Now, to the thing, when I was driving there, the barrier that right now cuts Martree in two, what's that all about?
Yeah, this is Jason Coffey again, EPCON Communities. You hit it right when you were discussing it. Basically, it's a timing issue. We committed to make that be the last connection point between our community and the neighboring community. And so as we get through our process, that will be a connection that will be made, but we just committed to delay that into a little bit in the future.
Has to do with of where construction traffic goes?
Correct.
All right, I'm with you. Now, we've talked about this connection with the trail, and I was trying to develop in the map of my mind what we were talking about, and quite frankly, I failed. Is there some way somebody can show me a map where the original connection was supposed to be and where you now want it to be, so I can understand what people were talking about a little bit better? Is that possible? Danny, do you have a map that might show, even in a large context, where those trail connections might go? I mean, where you might be able to point them out with a stylus or a cursor?
Commissioner Member Miller, I do have those site plans. Let me see if I can pull those.
It's not really necessary to pull up the actual site plans. I just want to get a feel for it.
I do actually have them though, and I can pull the locations of the original and the modified one.
Well, while you're looking, I'll go to my next question, which is
Commissioner Miller, just 1 sec. I'm going to get right back to you. I'm just going to give you a heads up. We've been asked to take a 10-minute break since we've been going for a few hours for the closed captioning. Why don't you ask one more question, and then we'll come back.
Danny's looking for maps. Maybe we should just take it.
I mean, if that works for you, and we can come back and start with you
I'm not
again.
building to a big point, so it's fine with me. This isn't my jury speech.
That makes sense. So again, just to remind everyone, closed captioning staff, every 2 hours, they require a 10-minute stretch break. We've been going for over 2 hours. We're going to take a 10-minute break. You're welcome to stay on the line. We will be back in 10 minutes, and we will resume this case with Commissioner Miller on the floor. Thank you all. Welcome back. Once you're back, if you can come off of, turn your video on, just so we know you're there. Once we have a quorum, we can get started again. And Commissioner Miller, the floor is yours. And I know if Mr. Coulter was able to pull up the map, we can put that up on the screen as well. But Commissioner Miller, you are welcome to continue your questions and comments.
Okay. I do kind of want to make sure that all the players are on the board. But I don't, Danny, are you there?
I am. And would you like me to go ahead and pull that up now?
Yeah, let's go. If you're ready, let's do that.
Sure, I can do that for you. In fact, this is the originally approved site plan.
And so site plan for what?
This is for the original courtyards at Southpoint.
Right. So the phase one or whatever.
Yes, and this
the part that's currently built.
That is under construction. In fact, a lot of these lots on the south end back here are still under construction right now.
Right. Okay, I'm with you.
So, and this is the parcel down here that is actually under review tonight. This piece of the American Tobacco Trail was originally approved, and it did show it actually moving through this parcel to make the connection point. So I think Mr. Ghosh was correct in that they would need an easement to, and you can see the dashed area for an easement to build that trail point. And then this is the—
Because the Herndon still owned that.
I cannot attest to that at the time, but—
well, let me put it another way. The developer didn't.
I don't think so. Correct. And this is the revised, revised or the amended plan. It shows this point ending here, and then with the amendment was that the trail would be constructed an easement to be dedicated upon the development of the Herndon parcel.
So I've got a problem. I'm trying to figure out. What you showed us before, was that a site plan or was it a development plan?
These are both site plans.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was the trail connection that you showed us before a commitment in the development plan for the Courtyards 1?
It is not. The original Courtyards is a conservation subdivision. So it's by right an approval of the site plan because it's still zoned.
So it's something they wanted to put in the site plan, but it was not anything that, at least in terms of their requirements and their relationship with the city of Durham and the zoning code, they had to do.
Actually, it is a Unified Development Ordinance requirement that you have to make a connection to
right, but you can't make a connection if you don't own property abutting.
That is true.
But now they do.
Yeah, that is true. That's correct.
And so they do plan to make a connection because they don't have to worry about getting an easement, but it's not going to be in the place they originally wanted to make it.
It's slightly shifted. I think it's a little closer. Let's look at this other plan again.
So it's in the same general area.
It's actually not. It's in the same general area. Yes.
All right. Now the other thing. Go back to the other map. Or no, you can keep this one up.
Okay.
So right where you've got your cursor, what's that? So put the other map back.
That's a lot.
No, put the other map back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. That's a buildable lot.
So between 36 and 35, there is a space. What is that?
That's a storm drain easement.
That is.
All right, very good.
Yes.
That helps. So that does clear those issues up a little bit. But if for some reason this rezoning that we're talking about today were not approved, what would be the obligation of the developer to create a connection to the American Tobacco Trail?
under this approved site, this amended site plan, it still would be connected to the trail upon construction, or upon development of this parcel.
Yeah, but if that a development of that parcel is not approved,
then they will not have a connection through at this point.
okay, that's what I was building to.
Yeah,
Now,
that-
the last thing I want to ask about, if I may, Mr. Chairman, is I'm concerned about stormwater catchment. Because I could tell when I stood at the end of Martree and looked down into the subject property, that was low and wet, and it wouldn't take a very big rainstorm to make that a pretty wet place, at least for a time. And if we introduce a lot of pavement and roofs and what have you, we're going to have to catch stormwater. So under this development plan, to what level would, as at a minimum service under the code, how would you describe the catchment rate?
Commissioner Miller, hey, this is Ryan Akers again with McAdams. I'm going to answer that one.
Okay, good.
So American Tobacco Trail kind of introduced an interesting situation on this phase one of Courtyards at Southpoint. It backed up a lot of stormwater with inadequate conveyance measures for what's described as a FEMA floodway and floodplain. That is the existing creek there. That whole backwater creates a substantial floodplain and floodway. So we had to.
It's kind of like a dam.
It very much like a dam. And as a matter of fact, when we developed Atkins Height Boulevard, we had to raise that road up substantially to convey that backwater. It was quite to do. We went through a FEMA conditional letter of map revision known as a CLOMAR, and we're actively working through a LOMAR, a letter of map revision to the FEMA floodplain because of that. This project will discharge south of the American Tobacco through the buffered feature that you aforementioned as the feature south of our property line. It still discharges to a FEMA floodplain, so I would not over detain because if you detain into
so the idea is to keep it moving.
You want to keep it moving, or else you're going to create a big gulp of water at the end of the curve. So yeah, we don't over detain into FEMA floodway, particularly in a case like this being so close to Jordan Lake. To that point, though, we are still very focused on water quality. So we will maintain the 85% TSS and the nutrient removals required for the Jordan Lake watershed.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're voluntary, or actually they're not in law at this point, but we still try to achieve those. So yeah, we're still trying to work towards water quality, and we will not try to over detain in this particular case.
So I want to ask one more question because I'm not an engineer and I don't play one on TV. Will the development of this project create or direct stormwater to any part of the developed communities that border you to the north or to the east? Don't everybody talk at once. Where does the water go?
I was on mute. I was saying, I'm screaming into my phone. Not to the north, not to the east. The gravity flows to the south and to the west, and we're discharging in that direction towards the American Tobacco Trail and under the Tobacco Trail.
And then my very last question, and thanks everybody for being patient. I am concerned about bringing Martree over the stream into the subject property from the north. What kind of, help me envision the roadway as it crosses that property boundary. And there's a fairly significant drop off right there because of the way the land has been graded. what's that going to look like? In other words, I see the road going in at a gentle slope, and I see that it's sitting at the top of a ramp that is going to have fairly broad shoulders in order to make up for the dip where the stream is. And then it would probably cross over one or two big corrugated pipes. Is that right?
It'll be one pipe likely. It's not a substantial drainage basin to the east and to the north of that crossing. It would likely be probably a 36-inch pipe in diameter, based on preliminary sizing.
Oh,
and between the existing phase 1 of Courtyards and this crossing, it would remain open space and green, probably be one of our open space. And if we can manage one of our active uses through, trails and active uses like disc golf or something that we can use for the community in that green space. But once we cross the environmental feature, that's where the development would commence.
Do you see the shoulders of that roadway being supported by broad earthen shoulders, or are you going to use some sort of hard retaining walls? Because I noticed as I drove around in the part that's being developed now, you've used quite a lot of hard material in your grading.
Right, and part of that is a result of dealing with the Corps of Engineers and the mitigation and permitting through that type of a stream feature. They typically require avoidance and minimization for impacts to perennial streams. In that case, we had to use those, I think they're fairly substantial modular block walls that you may have seen out there. And those were a result to try to avoid the impact to the perennial stream feature there. So we would do something, I wouldn't say so robust as those big block features, but we would try to use head walls and end walls to mitigate the amount of stream impact to appease the Corps of Engineers for the impact as required.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time, allowing me to take the time up today.
You're welcome, Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Baker, before we get to you, I did promise that we continue to have a few residents who already did speak and testify, but they've continued to have their hands raised. I know during these online meetings, it's difficult to be able to have the back and forth. I just want to give a moment to recognize each individual. I ask that you, if you would like to speak, if you can offer, if there's a specific question that you still have. I'm going to ask one by one as part of my time, but I do ask that you be brief. We've given each of you the opportunity to already speak in the public comment period, but I do want, in full transparency, to give you each a chance. So Karen Francola, your hand is raised. Is there any additional items that you want to make sure are addressed during this hearing?
Just very quickly, the link for Epcon at Southpoint, I sent it to Danny, still says leisure paths connecting to the AT&T. Is that something the city of Durham is okay with them basically promising this? And earlier, Epcon talked about apologies. Well, either Epcon is much more incompetent than any other company that has learned how to communicate during a pandemic, or they're willfully misleading the public. And very quickly, I appreciate the comment on no retaliation, and I would like a contact from Epcon of who I can contact if I do feel I have been retaliated against. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cultra, you may be able, I think we've talked about the issue with connecting to the American Tobacco Trail, but you may be able to address that again, and then I will ask the applicant to be able to address the additional points.
Well, I can't, all I can say is that I pulled those site plans of record to show that that's been approved. I don't know any previous, if there are any previous determinations about that, about allowing that through based on future developments. So I don't have the knowledge of that.
Okay, thank you. And I think as we've talked about, in this case, the connection would be a committed element that would and they would own this property, so that would then be a required commitment that would need to be addressed. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Thank you. And to the applicant, if you can choose who's the right person. If any of you would like to address the additional items, I guess really the main item is it. And you may just want to be in touch directly, but if there is a point of contact, it'd be useful to be able to share that.
And I'll speak. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, this is Jason Coffey, AppCon. Yes, we'll provide that. We'll provide a contact for you and moving forward, not only local, but at the corporate level as well.
Thank you. Tricia Smar, your hand is raised as well. Again, if you can be very brief, if there's a specific item that you haven't been able to have addressed or you want to make sure is noted, please.
Thank you. Yeah. So I still have some concerns about the drivers who will be using this road connecting Herndon and Fayetteville as a cut through. It's really not a direction about where the residents of Courtyards will want to go when they leave their community, but also who from outside will see this as a shortcut to drive relatively quickly, probably, and potentially endanger the lives of the families and the elderly folks living on either side. So I have a question for Josh Reinke, who did the TIA. It looks like Herndon and Fenwick intersection was excluded from the traffic impact analysis based on the assumption that traffic won't flow on Fenwick. However, given the potential for cut through commuters trying to reach 40, as well as the inevitable traffic surrounding the opening of the elementary school, how can Fenwick and Herndon not be taken into consideration? There are 3 other households who've spoken from my neighborhood voicing concerns about increased traffic, as well as others that are listening in. So I just wanted to ask for clarification and let y'all know that we need more information and communication about how these traffic concerns are going to be addressed proactively.
Sure. And so for clarification, we follow the city's UDO, and essentially what we're studying in this TIA is the impacts of the site and not necessarily, kind of maybe problematic traffic patterns that exist or anything like that. So when we say it's below the threshold to kind of really consider that, it means we've gathered the data. We say, here's the traffic that's expected from the site. If it's below the UDO there, it's a 10% rule. Then we say, all right, this site isn't expected to have a big impact. So it's not that there wouldn't be some cut through. I think there are more major roads where people would likely continue up and, use the roundabout and such to cut over if they're going to Fayetteville. It doesn't mean there wouldn't be any traffic. But once again, the purpose of this study is to see the impacts on the surrounding roadway network of this site. And once again, through communication with the city staff and NCDOT, we know that there will be some cut through traffic. We just don't think it's significant enough that we'd say we need to, send 100 trips through or anything like that in the peak hour. There will be some. You'd also have some of the site traffic going through kind of, that way. So that's what it is the reason that was eliminated in the TIA is we collected data. We came up with the assumptions of where traffic would go. We coordinated with the city and DOT. They said that's below our threshold where you need to consider saying this site has an impact on that intersection. So we do have, we're essentially providing a turn lane along Fayetteville at the realigned Atkins Heights. So that should safely get the traffic kind of into the site and off of Fayetteville Road. We don't expect major delays at that intersection on Fayetteville, even if there were some additional traffic, primarily because the vast majority would be turning right. They'd have those gaps in traffic. And then we do have, some of the signals that would be provided either by this developer or the other development that are tied to those signals. That's kind of adding capacity and the gaps in traffic for some of the problems along Fayetteville that already exist in Massey Chapel. So it's not that there wouldn't be any traffic. The reason that was eliminated is our site isn't expected to have a big impact on that intersection. And that's the purpose of this traffic impact analysis, is to see what our site should be responsible for.
Thank you. Barbara Taylor, same thing. If you can give us just if there's a specific item that you've got your hand raised that we can help address.
Sure, I'll be quick. This follow-up to Commissioner Miller's comments on the trail. For the record, I want to be noted that EPCON applied for the trail access at the end of that cul-de-sac in what is now being considered phase 1. on August 27th, 2019. They withdrew it 3 months later, November 26th, 2019. That was that fourth quarter is really when they started selling the lots. So from 2019, November, when they withdrew it till today, they have been selling all their advertising on the website. Everyone who's purchased has purchased with the understanding, as we were told by the sales team, that that connector was going in. Yet it had already been withdrawn over a year ago. So to our representative, to Jason Coffey, if he could just address, again, what would happen if this is not approved? Is there any plan at all? And if it is approved, how quickly will it be prioritized so that we do have access? Thank you.
Jason Coffey, Epcon Communities. I think as we've looked at both of these together, a couple things. One is that we think there's, just from a standpoint of environmental impacts, there's a lot better locations, flatter locations, et cetera, as a part of this phase 2. That's going to make a lot more sense for that direct connection. If you take a look at the site map that was done before, if you see where the parcel was actually owned along the tobacco trail, it was not where the trail was shown, because that was not been required. What was required was a connection where we own the property from the UDO. And if you take a look at that, I think it was mentioned before that does not meet ADA. If you're out there, and Mr. Miller, if you're out there as well, it's a pretty steep drop off, a pretty steep rise. Therefore, the connection could not be made on our property. The intent all along was for us to make it. We think it's an important component of this community, but we tried to work through an easement situation, didn't work, which led us to potentially buying this property. And I think it's going to make a better connection for everyone, not only for phase 1, but also phase 2 and the neighbors to our east. So.
And the
Thank you.
priority?
Thanks for that answer. Marie Bradford, again, very quickly, is there an item that you want to address that we haven't been able to raise at this point?
Yes, we wanted to just revisit the water aspect. We are at 201 Rocky Walk, so we're at the, I guess you could say, the southeastern side of on Southampton, and we have the retention pond and everything, by us. I'm just wondering, with the water that is going to, the storm water that's going to run off from the Epcon subdivisions, is that going to impact us down here? To our understanding, we're not in the floodplain, but could that potentially put us in the floodplain? We're just very concerned with that, because we are, I think we would say, the lowest level of the Southampton subdivision here.
Thank you. And the applicant, I know you've given us a lot of information on the stormwater, but if there's any additional information you can share, that'd be great.
What was that address again?
I apologize. I disabled their talking. Who was the last speaker again?
Marie Bradford, I believe.
Thank you. Yes, Leon and Marie Bradford at 201 Rocky Walk Court.
Right by the retention pond.
Right by the retention pond.
Very south end is
Rocky Walk Court is upstream from this development, so there will be zero impacts from this development on the development on the east side of the power line easements.
Okay, we're upstream. That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. That's really helpful. Finally, Thomas Warsham, you've raised your hand as well. I want to give you the opportunity.
I just have a very quick question. My address, we haven't moved in the neighborhood yet, but it's 1453 Cherub, which backs up to the floodplain. But my question is involving Atkins Height. Can someone explain how that works into the phase 2? Is that going to be a connector from Fayetteville into phase 2, or what? I don't understand what that is. And that's all. That's the only question I have.
Thank you. Can someone from the applicant address that?
With the map.
Hey, yeah, Ryan Akers, I don't know if you can, this is Jason Coffey. Ryan, if you can handle that. I really wasn't sure what the question was, so I can't.
I'm trying to figure that one out myself. He said Atkins Height alignment. Can
Realignment. Where does it go to? It dead ends right now.
They can't hear you.
Yeah.
Mr. Worsham, you may need to provide clarification to be able to answer your question.
Can you hear?
Chairman, I think he wants to see a map of what it will look like when realigned.
Yes. We just don't know. I don't have any idea. That's just a dirt road right now. We have no idea what that realignment, and it dead ends. I just don't understand what that realignment means and how that affects our neighborhood.
Okay, this is Jason Coffey. Again, I'll try, and Neil, you may want to add in, but when we realign what's now Martree, that's the realignment of Atkins Height. The Atkins Height that was almost a kind of a paper right of way, that's going to be vacated. And that's going to be part of the whole overall transition with the church that we've dedicated. The new right of way you see, you drive up and down to Fayetteville, the old Atkins Height will be vacated. It won't be a road.
And yeah, and if it's helpful, I mean, that language is a little confusing, but that's because the existing road, which is called Atkins Heights Boulevard, which is that dirt road you're talking about, the new entrance, the existing entrance to Southpoint, Courtyards and Southpoint 1 is the realignment of Atkins Heights Boulevard.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Worsham. Thank you to the applicants. Really appreciate you taking time to be able to answer those additional questions during the case here at the Planning Commission. I have a couple other questions, but I want to let other commissioners speak first. So I'm going to give the floor to Commissioner Baker, and then I may ask a question or two before we wrap up.
Thanks, Chair Busby. Yeah, I have just one quick and simple question for the applicant, just in kind of considering the large size of this site, 40 acres. I'd like to know from the applicant team how this proposal will contribute to climate and energy sustainability, or how it will at least offset any of the negative impacts it will have on climate and energy sustainability. For example, are there any green building elements or any green building practices? That's all.
So I think, as you know, there's no commitments to in the development plan for specific green building aspects or green components. I think, Jason, if you want to speak to EPCON's development generally, and some of the things you guys do, maybe that would be helpful to answer Commissioner Baker's question.
Jason Coffey, EPCON Communities. Again, I think that was a pretty, maybe a fairly broad question, but I think a couple things. One, using our lot sizes, again, they're smaller lot sizes, so therefore less road frontage is needed. And the maintenance is on a smaller overall lot size, which I think, again, adds to not only the low maintenance aspect, but also some of the impacts you mentioned as well. We typically get into energy efficient appliances as well, and the amount of open space and some of the treat areas we're saving between the stream and the north property line. I think those all give benefit to some of the items you were asking about. I'm not sure if that's specific what you're looking for, and I'd be happy to answer more.
And additionally, I mean, it is a 40-acre site, but it's also, I mean, this is like pure infill. This does not contribute to sprawl in any way. This is in between two existing communities. We're making connections to communities that are existing. So we're not contributing to sprawl in that manner. The site is going to add to the existing infrastructure, which I do think helps overall, because avoiding that leapfrog type development.
And you can also see, Mr. Baker, on the site plan we have, as far as, you know, our impact of development is fairly minimal on the 40 acres.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't see any other commissioners raising their hand at this point, so you're welcome to do so. I did have two issues that I wanted to hear a little more on. I know you've talked about both of them, but you know, what I've heard from the neighbors this evening are a variety of questions. The two that stood out to me, that, you know, I know the TIA and the traffic assessment and some of those upgrades, to me, I believe will help. There is going to be some traffic in the neighborhood. I think that's inevitable as you have additional growth. That would happen even under the current zoning if this land was developed by right. But the two issues that have stuck out to me, one is this question on stormwater runoff. I know you've talked about the unique location, but there is also trying to capture some of the sediment that may be running off the site, but also just continue to give the neighbors the confidence they need that they won't be dealing with that kind of runoff on their property, both during construction and when the construction's finished. And then the second is if you could provide any additional guidance and thoughts on how do you manage construction traffic if you are going to have to be coming through an existing community to then be able to reach the construction site. And are there things that you can do to work with the neighbors? Do you have experiences in other communities where you've run into this? So any just additional guidance you can give us on the stormwater and on the construction traffic would be great.
Sure. And I'm going to ask Brian to weigh in, but before I do, let me just say, I think it might be helpful. As you mentioned, Chair Busby, we have talked a lot today about the stormwater. I think it might be helpful if the map were oriented in the appropriate north-south direction, because I think that we've been saying that the water is flowing kind of south and west. That's not where these communities are. But if you look at that map, it's turned on its side. Maybe that's where the misunderstanding is coming. So I think that might be helpful. But Ryan, if you could maybe address again the stormwater concern, what specifically is being done on this site, that in a way that will help alleviate the neighbors' concerns that they might experience additional flooding.
Sure. Yeah. So Chairman Busby, you bring up a comment that I hear. It's a ubiquitous comment amongst every municipality in the Triangle, most of which are in the Triassic Basin, where we have these colloidal soils, the clayey soils, that when it rains, the water turns brown. There's nothing I can really do about that other than provide polyacrylamides, which are a colloidal it's an anti-colloidal that pulls that coloration out of the water. The point being is that there's two things, that we have water quality and water quantity. Quantity, I do not want to emphasize that we're going to over detain and prevent flooding on these properties. There's not a flooding concern because we're entering a FEMA floodplain that's part of Jordan Lake watershed. If we over detain, we're going to exacerbate the issue. So we want to let the water out because we're closer to the flooding concern. So you want to get the water out quicker, sooner. Now, when it comes to water quality, which a lot of people think of as the color of the water, we have to think about, okay, why is the water colored? Okay, during construction, you have a lot of sediment from wheel tracking and things that are happening on these individual construction sites. That happens through adding silt fence and construction entrances, things that Durham County regulates and we address. But the fact of the matter is, we can't 100% control all of these clayey soils getting into the stormwater during construction. So we set up these erosion control measures. They're called, I think they're called a fair cloth anti-siphon. There's these top water dewatering measures. There's erosion control measures that collect the sediment or detain the sediment and treat it during construction. Having said that, that's a conversation during construction. When all of that sediment is stabilized, the houses are built, the sod is in, the grass is growing, there shouldn't be sedimentation in these stormwater measures. And at that point, we have true water quality features where the wetland plants truly take up the water quality, the phosphorus and nitrogen. And that's what I think, a lot of people don't really recognize. They're just seeing the sediment rolling off from the construction site. That's why we have silt fence and tree protection fence and these skimmer basins. So I say all that we do the best we can to address the construction, and it's by lot, and we do, we have measures, we meet the county ordinance, we try to go above and beyond, and that's the best we can do at this point.
Right. And so if I can say this back to you to make sure I have it right, but also so folks listening understand that given where the stormwater will move, it will not be moving toward the current residents, it'll be moving away. And in this case, we are seeing more applicants coming in offering to put in 100-year stormwater features, which I strongly support. In this case, given the unique location being near FEMA floodplain and Jordan Lake properties, you're suggesting it's actually better to meet the code, but not go beyond the code, because given being on a FEMA floodplain area, it's actually better for water quality to let the water keep moving into that area as opposed to trying to capture more of it on site. Is that accurate?
So again, you said water quality versus water quantity. When you talk detention, I would advocate that you do not over detain when you're discharging to a FEMA floodway, in this case, for that purpose that you're downstream. And if everybody upstream detains and they let out at a certain rate, and then you let out at a certain rate and you're delayed, and then you let out when everybody else lets out, it's a huge glut of water that comes in. We don't want to do that. We want to let our water out and let everybody upstream who is also detaining in a developed basin such as this. So that is true from a water quantity standpoint. You also said water quality, which is different. That's your wetland plants, your settling time, that's the thing where you remove the nutrients out of the water. That's a different metric, and that we will achieve to the Jordan Lake watershed requirements.
Great, thank you. Yeah, sorry for misspeaking. And then the second thing on the construction traffic, any additional guidance that you can offer us, especially for the neighbors that have come this evening raising that concern?
Yeah, this is Jason Coffey again, EPCON Communities. Again, this is a unique site of an infill where we're coming through neighborhood streets. I think, again, some of this is, if anybody's been at Southpoint Section 1 sees how rapidly we have sold and built. Normally they take a little more time, so we thought we'd have more time to get into the development of this phase 2. But that being said, I think we expect the same type of velocity in phase 2. That's one component of this, is the quicker we can get in and out, it's better for both neighbors. And two, I think just what came out tonight, we've been texting with some folks, so we need to get a neighborhood meeting pretty quickly. Obviously, we've had a lot of people close in South Point in the last couple months. That's great for us, great for them, but obviously from a communication standpoint, we have some work to do on that end. And I think this is going to be some of the discussions we can have as far as the timing, when we have construction traffic, how that works. We have to get into the site, obviously. That's not going to be fun, but we can at least have the discussion, kind of coordinate, and try to get something that works for everyone.
Great, thank you. And it's great to hear that commitment to have additional outreach with the community. As I think most folks know, we are the advisory body. And so when this comes through us, it then goes to the governing body, which in this case, it will be the city council. There will be a few months between this case leaving the planning commission and going to the city council. So it sounds like you are planning to do some additional outreach in the interim, which I think is really important and appreciated.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for answering my questions. Commissioner Durkin.
Yep, I agreed. One of my major concerns is what we heard from the neighbors about the lack of information that they've received about this. But I did have one question for the applicant. If you're intending this to be a 55+ community, why are you not restricting it to being a 55+ community?
This is Jason.
Yeah, Jason, you want to take it? Go ahead.
Well, and again, Neil, you'll be able to add in there's a legal component, but from our standpoint is we have a Section 1 South Point that was not age restricted. We think from a marketing and selling, it would be a confusion as to changing that age restriction between the two sections. Our homes are the same homes we're going to build with or without it. So there's no change to that. And therefore our demographic and buyer are the same, but it's more of just a confusion between two phases of one being age restricted, the other not being, and having it be later an HOA issue to try to monitor in the future. Neil, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I was going to say moreover, and I think that's exactly right. The phase one was not age restricted because that was conservation subdivision didn't really require any. It was by right. So on this one being phase two, it made sense to not age restrict this so that they would have a similar format, particularly the HOAs when we combine. The other aspect of it is that an age restriction would have artificially reduced our trip count. And, you know, in fairness, we know that the first phase is not age restricted. So age restricting this would have, you know, probably been a disservice from a traffic standpoint. This allowed us, I mean, this, you know, by not age restricting it, this counted as regular single family, and we did a full TIA and have submitted to traffic improvements as a result thereof.
Okay, thanks. You made me remember a question I had when I was reading through this earlier in the week. Why are you not doing a conservation subdivision on this parcel?
And I can let Ryan speak to that. My understanding is this parcel would not really meet the standard for a conservation subdivision. But Ryan, do you want to maybe weigh in on that? If I have missed them.
Just to meet the open space and primary conservation, we didn't meet the tree requirements of the 10-inch caliper. It's just an open space requirement. It just simply didn't meet it.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller.
I just want to follow up on the age targeted, because I think that, I mean, that's even written into the commitments. It's not, what makes it age targeted as opposed to just houses available for anybody to buy?
So EPCON is an age targeted developer. Many.
Yeah, but what is it?
Yeah, I'm getting there. Most of their communities are age restricted. Some of them are not, but they build single family homes primarily that have first floor living. So all of the bedrooms are downstairs.
Right.
That is what they would consider age targeted. Their communities also are programmed, I'm talking about event wise, you know, targeted for.
So it has to do with architecture and amenities.
Yeah.
I would say it goes beyond that. This is Ryan from the engineering side. We move a lot of dirt and spend a lot of money making these sites very flat. And when I say very flat, we don't exceed ADA requirements of 5% running slope on any street. And all of the homes don't have steps so that you can age in place and don't have to worry about wheelchair accessibility for aging in place. And so when you talk about dealing with the land that's left in Durham as topographically challenged as some of these areas are left, you know, you guys are obviously focused on the Searles Basin with some of the substantially topographically challenged areas. You have an age qualified or age targeted community. You have to flatten that to make it usable. You're putting in retaining walls everywhere and removing every bit of vegetation just to make that site viable from an engineering standpoint. So there's a lot of money and a lot of engineering that goes into these communities to make them viable from an age qualified and age restricted standpoint. So it's not just something that's architecturally controlled. It's very much tied to the engineering aspect.
And Mr. Miller, this is Jason Coffey again. Also, we have very strict HOA rules, and our yards are passive. So you know, a lot of typical single family subdivisions have the soccer goals and basketball hoops and yard things you can do. We prohibit those. So it's intended to be a really.
Yeah, I saw your sign that said you mow the lawn.
Yep.
Great. Commissioner Miller, looks like you're finished. I don't see any other commissioners that are looking to ask any questions or make any comments. So I think we're at the point where it would be appropriate to make a motion. I do see Commissioner Lowe asking to be recognized. Commissioner Lowe?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, this age targeted, but that means that a 20-year-old something has just as much right to live there as a 60-year-old something. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, there is no age restriction by covenant. That is correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Commissioner Lowe. So I'm going to ask for a motion in a moment. I do want to just share, I'm going to plan to vote for this. I hear the concerns of the residents. I appreciate that they came out this evening. I think that we're talking about 49 single-family homes by right. This would be 72 single-family homes in a part of the community that is seeing additional growth. I think this will allow for the long overdue connection to the American Tobacco Trail. But I do hope and I appreciate that the applicants will continue to work with the community to help answer their questions, because it does seem like there has definitely been a disconnect. I think tonight allowed us to start to work through some of those questions. It was helpful for me to hear about the stormwater and the location. I think on the whole, though, I'm inclined to see this as something that is worth moving forward and sending to council. But again, I hope that the applicants will continue to work with and address as many of the community concerns as possible as this moves toward approval. That said, I will ask for a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, then with regard to case Z20000014, concerning the project known as Courtyards at Southpoint II, I move that we send that forward to the City Council with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Miller, seconded by Commissioner Amendolia, and we'll have the roll call vote.
Okay, Amendolia,
No.
Baker,
No.
Busby,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Cutright,
Yes.
Durkin,
No.
Kanchin,
Yes.
Lanfried,
Yes.
Lowe, Commissioner Lowe,
Yes.
McIver,
No.
Miller, Commissioner Miller,
Yes, I wish you people had explained your reasons better, because I'm torn on this one. I'm going to vote yes, and if I can, I agree with Mr. Busby. It seems to me unlikely that you're going to get fewer units on this piece of property than you're going to get with this project.
Morgan,
No.
Commissioner Cease had to leave. Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Williams appears to be on the call, but Chris, is Commissioner Williams on the phone or the Zoom call?
I see Commissioner Williams on the panelists.
Yeah, I
just
do too.
to ask to unmute.
I know she was having technical issues earlier.
Okay. And Chris, if you don't see Commissioner Williams, then we're going to move on without that vote. Yeah, I don't see.
I'm unable to reach.
Okay. Okay. Well, then I'm going to mark Commissioner Williams off, and that means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like it passes 7-5 because it looks like we have 12 people that voted. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for sticking with us through the break and through this long case. I appreciate it. Again, this will move forward to council in a few months, so I encourage you to stay engaged on the issue, and you will see that when it is when it shows up on the city council agenda, you'll be able to know when it will be heard by council. I do want to ask the commissioners just to stay on for another moment or two. I know we didn't add it to the agenda. This is the end of our official business for the evening. I know Commissioner Landry, I want to give you the floor. I know you have a bittersweet update for us.
Thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to need to be ending my time on the Planning Commission. I had hoped to be able to serve for a lot longer, but my husband's job is relocating unexpectedly for a year. So we'll be moving to Charleston this summer, but coming back to Durham. I grew up in Durham. It's been a real honor to serve with you all and learn from you all. And I'm so impressed with the commitment and knowledge of the staff and the Planning Commission. So thank you for, letting me join you for this brief time. And I'm sorry it couldn't be longer.
I'm sorry you have to spend all that terrible time in Charleston.
I know Durham is the best place in the world, so it's hard to leave, but I know no one will cry too hard for me. I know.
We'll look forward to seeing you when you get back, Jesse.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope by then, I'd love to meet anyone for coffee or drink in person. I've never attended an in-person Planning Commission meeting, so that would be a pleasure.
Yeah, well, Jessie, you've been great, and I'll communicate with you separately. We'd love to have you come back so we can honor your time here at the start of a future meeting, and then you'll get the ability to leave that meeting while we stay for hours and deliberate. But thanks for everything you've done, and hope you'll be able to come back and join us when you're back in Durham.
Thank you.
Grace, anything else that we need to know about? And can you give us a quick forecast for our regular meeting in April and maybe the other meeting as well?
Sure. So the, hang on one second. The regular meeting in April right now for April looks like, give me 1 second. The schedule's loading for me right now. Looks like we have the continued case. Parcel K is coming back, the continued case. We have 2 other zoning cases you have not heard yet, Griffin Place and 1051 Olive Branch. And we have several information items. We have the Planning Department Work Program. We have Land Use Engagement Initiative that we're bringing to you that we talked about last month. Briefly, and we have looks like maybe potentially, this is tentative, an info item about the tier quarry. So it'll be a mix of maybe 3 public hearings and several info items for the 13th. And then the 27th, as you know, we're concentrating on the goals and objectives for the comprehensive plan. So that's all we're going to discuss in here at that meeting. We are working on posting the details on the website for this week for that, and I'll make sure that that is shared with you all. So if you get questions from the community, you'll have that information. And that's all I can tell you right now.
Great. I will share the Environmental Affairs Board sent, I think at least Armir and I think got comments that I will send to everyone just so on the comprehensive plan part. So I'll send that around in the next day or so. Commissioner Miller, it looked like you had a question.
I do, and it's concerning what we're expected to do as a result of the hearing that we will hold on the 27th. So on the 27th, the staff will present the draft objectives for the comprehensive plan, goals and objectives. And I suspect that we will hear from groups and individuals who may want additions or changes, etc. What are we, when we're done with our hearing, are we going to vote up or down, or are we going to consider the things we've heard and say we should add this, and are we going to recommend changes, or what's the nature of the action you anticipate we will take as a result of hearing those public comments?
It's difficult for me to forecast that because I'm not really sure what you're going to hear. And I know
No, but it's the nature of the action. Do you want an up or down vote, or do you want us to
Well, I don't know that we're going to ask you to take action that night. I'll delve into that and get back with you as a group and let you know. I'm not sure that how affirmative we are about having to have action that night, but I'll find out and let you know. We'd like to see how it's going to go first, probably.
Yeah, it's a long document as it is now. Well, not terribly long, but there are a lot of moving parts, and to make sure, I would like us to be able to say, to deliberate together a little bit and say we liked this and recommend to make some recommendations that are more nuanced than an up or down vote. Maybe other people feel differently.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, I'm not aware that there's any need that it has to be voted on that night. Again, I'll double check what the expectations are, or maybe what the environment is going to look like. But it's a public hearing. It is a large document. It's an important document. So I know that it's going to, we're probably going to hear from a variety of different people and different comments, or we're expecting that.
Commissioner Miller, it's a good question. I've been assuming it's probably a lot like a lot of the items we see at the joint city county planning committee meetings, where we're usually not voting on items, but we're offering a lot of guidance and feedback that might get incorporated. But I wasn't sure how this will work either. So it will be useful to hear from staff about kind of your expectations and what you're looking for from us, so that we can be productive.
Well, at some point you will be asked to make a recommendation, obviously.
Right.
I mean, that is, where we're going with this, but whether or not we need it that night, I can't tell you sitting right here, right this minute.
Right, and we've got another meeting before then. I just want to make sure that if the staff who has been working, the staff members who've been working so hard on this with the public kind of have an expectation of what our involvement is, that we're at least aware of it, so that we don't get tangled up and miss the point. If there is a point, tell us, and I would appreciate that, because I don't want to fall short of expectations or to mess up the works, unless it's deliberate. I don't want to mess up the works accidentally. Let's put it that way.
Well, I would like to just have a conversation with the staff and get back with you on that, because I hate to say one way or the other tonight, and get people confused or mislead anyone. So we've got some time. I'll work on that and get back with you directly.
You're very kind. Thank you, Grace.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, the meeting's adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.